everyone. Good evening, good morning for some of us, good afternoon, wherever you are. My name is Anthony Wooten, and I'll be your host for this evening. For those of you who couldn't make it yesterday, this is our continuation of our 2020 Isol conference. So yesterday went wonderfully. For those of you who couldn't make it, I'm so sorry you did miss out, but today we have some even greater stuff. So don't worry, we'll be just fine today. We're gonna get right into it. I want to go over a couple things. Really quickly, if you have any questions or any statements throughout any of the presentations, please feel free to use either the Q&A function on the top right of your Zoom app for any of our attendees as well as speakers. And you can also use the chat function. You can send some of your chat questions to either the presenters, or you can send them directly to us. And we have a live correspondent who is answering all of our questions. So don't worry, we would love your engagement. We are eager to have you all here. We're so thankful for you all. And we're thankful to have some of you commenting on some of our awesome speakers. We're going to get into our speakers a little bit later on, but I'm going to go through our schedule for this evening's ceremony. So first, we're going to go ahead and start with Dr. Singh Singh, did you want to do a quick little introduction, or
Yeah.
You and Dr. Fraser? Okay, awesome. So we're going to start with a quick little introduction between our chair and co-chair, Dr. Sunitha Singh Sengupta, as well as Dr. Nikki Fraser. Then we're going to move right into our keynote address, which is very, very exciting. We're then going to move into our plenary session 2, then our panel discussion 2. Then we're going to move into our research paper presentations, which is awesome because it's been some of you all who have presented, who have submitted some of your work. So it's really awesome so that we can show off all of the hard work that people have put into this conference. So that'll be awesome. And then we're going to have our closing ceremony. We're going to be wrapping everything up. We're going to be ending on a high note, so don't worry. But like I said, everyone, we have some awesome, awesome presenters. Also, I've been told that I speak fast, so please let me know. If I can slow down, I will say, Anthony, shut up. You're speaking too fast, okay? Let me know, please. Alrighty, guys, let's get right into it. I have the awesome, awesome honor of introducing a wonderful woman. I work directly under her. I'm going to give her a quick little bio, just so you know, for those of you who weren't here yesterday. Dr. Sunitha Singh Sengupta. Quick reminder, she is the founder and director of the Isol Foundation. She has also published over 29 books. And she's also published, amongst those 29 books, over 40 different articles. So that is a body of work that is something to be proud of and to be honored. I have the proud, awesome honor of introducing Dr. Sunitha Singh Sengupta.
Thank you, Anthony. So good morning and good evening to each and all of you. We have with us the esteemed speakers and also our chairman, Dr. J.L. Raina, board of member, Mr. Krishna Kumar, and I welcome each and all of you. I can see Professor Charumati has also joined. So I'll quickly make you walk through what we started as Isol Foundation. I'm very happy and delighted to have Dr. Connie Baker, with whom we started the first international conference on integrating spirituality and organizational leadership. We explore sustainability through spirituality. Good morning, Professor Agarwal. Good evening.
Yes, a very good evening, Dr. Singh Sengupta. What an absolute privilege and honor it is to be here today with you, and greetings to everybody around the world. Is it okay if I continue on? And
just give me 1 minute, Dr. Baker.
Thank you.
Isol Global Foundation was launched in 2015 in USA, and where we believe enriching enterprises through spiritual values, because spiritually based businesses outperform others globally. So Today is the second day of ISOL 2020, the virtual conference on integrating spirituality and organizational leadership in post-COVID time. ISOL focuses on the subtle, softer part of human behavior in organization. There are many conferences which going on the economic scale up into our post-COVID times. However, we focus on the human dimension, how we can improve mental health at workplace, how we can align people with us to navigate through this difficult time. So the conference tracks, which are made bold, was covered yesterday. The world as a global market versus world as a global family, global cities and the transformation of boundaries, peace and harmony, connecting to local communities and society for sustainable development, feminine styles of leadership, fearless entrepreneurial leadership to navigate post-COVID times. Today, we will be focusing on compassion and love-based leadership style in the era of digital transformation. And we are looking forward for Dr. Sandeep Krishnamurthy. He will be joining anytime. We have Dr. Connie Becker, who will be speaking on human value-centric leadership style to align people with organizations. We have Dr. Sarah Hurst. She will be talking as a valedictory lecture on integrating spirituality into financial decision making. And we have a wonderful panel discussion on modern agile and the role of spirituality in digital transformation, where we have Professor Bhuvan Unhelkar, we have Andy Lehman, and we have Professor Agarwal. So these are the speakers for today, and we are excited and looking forward to their deliberations. And with these few words, I once again welcome all of you and thank you very much. Up to Anthony now.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Singh Gupta. I am honored to introduce to you all our awesome keynote speaker. But before we get to our keynote speaker, I want to say really quickly, in between each sessions that we're having, we will have 5-minute intervals for breaks. So if you have to, do anything or come back, you can wait to those sessions so that you won't miss anything. Also keeping in mind to all of our wonderful panelists, thank you all again for joining us. And if you could just keep in mind the time so that we can see everyone tonight and that we can get all of our questions answered from some of our the attendees that had some questions to ask. So awesome. So we can get right into our awesome keynote address. That will be Mr. Cornay Becker. You just heard a lot about him, but I'll give you a little bit more of his background so you know a little bit more. Mr. Cornay Becker serves currently as the Dean of the Regent School of Divinity in Virginia Beach, Virginia, and the United States of America. He previously served as the Associate Dean for academics of Rhema Bible College in Johannesburg, South Africa, and as the Department Chair of Biblical Studies and Christian Ministry and the Regent University College of Arts and Sciences. Becker also led the PhD in can I get my words out? Wow. An organizational leadership, ecclesial leadership major of the School of Business and Leadership, and is actively involved in research on the use of biblical hermeneutics and spirituality to explore Christian and ecclesial leadership. Becker previously served as the editor of the Journal of Biblical Perspectives in Leadership and the co-editor of Inner Resources for Leaders, which sounds like a very interesting body of work that I'm excited to hear. I have the honor of presenting Mr. Cornay Becker.
Anthony, thank you so much. And firstly, folks, just a quick apology. I jumped in a little bit earlier than what I should have. But always Dr. Singh Gupta, with her extraordinary grace, was just able to facilitate that. Once again, thank you for the opportunity to address you for a few moments today. This is such an important association. This is such an important organization. I think we all recognize that we are living during a time of extraordinary trouble. And more than ever before, we need to carefully consider, how do we lead? Let me go ahead and just share my screen with you just for a moment. And then, folks, I will make sure that I keep within the 20 minutes, indeed. So I've entitled this presentation, "And a Little Child Shall Lead Them: The Human-Orientated Leader as a Countermeasure for Narcissistic Leadership." And dear colleagues, I apologize already. We are always victims of our discipline. So I'm going to come at this from a theological perspective, somewhat of an historical, reconstructive perspective. That is the area that I've been trained in. And I've been so grateful just to rub shoulders with people like Dr. Sunita Singh Gupta and all these wonderful speakers, because I can learn from all of you indeed. Well, let me just go on with a little introduction here. So most of us recognize that we are in trouble not only within the world, but often in our perceptions and practices of leadership. There was a great article almost 20 years back now. There was really a call to arms, in essence, an alarm call. Written within the Harvard Business Review. And Maccabee wrote the following and said that today's business leaders maintain a markedly higher profile than did their predecessors of previous generations. A growing need for visionary and charismatic leadership has brought to the fore executives of a personality type psychologists call narcissistic. And folks, I think we have all recognized that this is an increasing problem around the world. People that are so taken with their own greatness that they have led in ways that are not transformative, and certainly have not considered the people that they serve. So today, in today's short presentation, 3 things that I would like to cover. I would like to speak for a few moments about the narcissistic leader, and then speak a little bit about the journey in organizational leadership theory development in this move towards an integrative theory of leadership that would not only focus on the leader, but also on the follower. And thirdly, I want to then do a proposal from the Christian, really the Judeo-Christian tradition, that it is possible to have a leadership approach that deeply connects with individuals as humans, a human-orientated approach to leadership that I call leading as a child. And hopefully this will make sense to everyone. Narcissistic leaders avoid experiences of emptiness, lack of worth, and powerlessness by reorientating the ego towards itself, and by doing so, making the ego the foundational ground of self. The narcissistic leader avoids fragmentation, annihilation, and shame, and in doing so, choose grandiosity, idealization, and self-inflation. Dear colleagues, I believe that many of us have come across leaders that have chosen to lead by inflating themselves, and not only inflating themselves, but indeed have these illusions of grandeur in which they idealize, in essence, their role within an organization, and making it perhaps a little bit bigger than what it's supposed to be. Kathy Schnurrer, almost 10 years ago, at the annual conference of the Society of Industrial and Organizational Psychology, made this statement about narcissistic leaders. And she said, and I quote, "Narcissists are intensely competitive, self-centered, exploitative, and exhibitionistic. They tend to surround themselves with supplicants." And folks, just think about that word for a moment. Not true followers, not fellow leaders, but supplicants that they see as inferior. When they are challenged or perceive competition, they often derogate and undermine anyone, even the closest to them they perceive as threats. And unfortunately, they are vigilant in scanning for threats. folks and dear colleagues, without naming names, I think we have all noticed that on the public arena of leadership around the world, we have seen often this kind of perspective and leadership that has been so damaging to our world and indeed to people. Well, in essence, when we think about this, it is true that organizational leadership as an academic field started within the 1800s. And the very first theory that came up, that scholars came up with, in actual fact, this was around about the 1840s, is this theory called the great man theory. And this was indeed an approach to say, well, leaders are not made, they in essence, they are born, and there are certain attributes that give rise to particular leadership. And folks, most of these approaches to leadership, these attempts to describe what leaders were about, in essence, fed this approach to what leadership indeed could be. Out of this, later on in the 1930s and 40s came trait theory to say that certain leaders have specific traits that make them better than others. Sometimes those traits were, they had to be male, they had to be tall, had to have good hair, shiny teeth, and a dominant personality. In the 1940s, a next round of theories emerged, behavioral theories that, again, were really focused on the identity of the leader. When the 1960s, with all of the social changes started to take place, contingency theories started to surface as an approach to see, could we find more transformative leadership approaches that would not only allow a leader to, in essence, step forward as a dictator, but reach out to followers and create organizations that indeed could be transformative. You are probably all aware of the contingency theories that came out of this: fieldless contingency theory, the Hershey-Blanchard situational leadership theory, PAFCO theory, and of course one can continue on ad nauseum to speak about all the different approaches. In the 1970s, scholars started to recognize that this construct of leadership was larger than the leader, that perhaps we should consider the relationship between leader and follower. And of course, it was during this time that transactional leadership theories started to surface. One particular one that's still used today is leader-member exchange, or LMX for short. Also during the 1970s, folks started to realize, well, maybe we should study leaders that have the ability to transform the world around them. And out of this came, of course, transformational leadership theories. Burns, Bass, Kouzes, and Posner. These are just some of the approaches, indeed, that we're taking. Well, folks, in the 1970s and 80s, people started to shift a little bit and said, well, we recognize that this kind of dominant, hard form of leadership is not working for us. And out of this, of course, started to come a more values-based approach. One can think of Greenleaf servant leadership theory that I'm sure everybody's familiar with, ethical leadership. And it was really only towards the 90s and beginning of the new century that there was an approach for a more integrative approach to leadership that would take all of the human person, both the leader and the follower, in account in the constructing of leadership. And this is the area, of course, that we are deeply interested in, this integrative approach that would also consider the role of spirituality in leadership. One can think of Jody Fry's spiritual leadership theory, authentic leadership theory, cultural-based leadership theories, etc., during that time. Well, folks, this is where I come in. I've been deeply interested in forms of leadership that could be more transformative, and particularly in my own faith tradition. I come at this as a Christian, and I think we all know that the history of Christianity has not always been positive when it comes to the areas of leadership. One can think of the practices of slavery, colonialism, and I can go down the line. And almost 10 years ago, I wrote a paper in which I started to look if we could come up with a theoretical model of Christian leadership that indeed could be transformative. At that point in time, it seemed that most Christian leadership theories were focused on really 4 areas of leadership. This idea to imitate that which is good, in essence, that it's mimetic. Secondly, that it's this approach that's deeply concerned with a deeper understanding of how power could transform organizations and people and worlds. Thirdly, and this is the area that I really want to focus in, is the fact that it had to be follower-centered. And lastly, for me as a Christian, of course, I would find my inspiration within Christ, that it is indeed Christological. Well, folks, today, this was a short introduction, and I know I've got about 9 minutes left. I would love to speak from my own tradition and propose an approach to leadership that is indeed human orientated, that could in essence be a counter to narcissistic approaches in leadership in my own faith tradition. I hope and trust, of course, and folks, as I say this, I am not at the moment proposing that one religion has indeed all the answers when it comes to leadership. There's so much that we can learn from one another. And here particularly, I would like to look at a story that's of particular interest to us for Christians during this time. And this is the birth story of Jesus, particularly from one gospel. Of course, Christians during this time, this is the season of Advent that we prepare to celebrate Christmas, the birth of Jesus of Nazareth. Now, in this particular context, I'm going to read a short, small little text from the Gospel of Matthew. And what I would like to highlight immediately is that in this short text from the Gospel of Matthew, Matthew is indeed speaking about the birth of Jesus. And in the story, he contrasts Jesus as a leader with 2 other Roman leaders. One is Herod the Great. The other one was the Emperor Domitian. Herod the Great reigned as a client king in Israel, in Judea, during the time of the birth of Jesus. The Emperor Domitian is a very oppressive Roman emperor that persecuted people of other religions, including Christians, during the writing of this particular gospel. And let me also quickly say to you that during this time, the Greco-Roman world led in a particular way. One can use possibly the Greek philosopher Plato's description of what leadership looked like during this time. And of course, you remember that Plato in his Republic identified 5 forms of leadership during the Greco-Roman time period. Well, the Roman empire led in a very particular way. And this is a leadership that I've highlighted here called timocratic leadership, from the Greek word timao. Timocratic leadership is a leadership that is absolutely obsessed with power, prestige, and privilege. It's kind of that narcissistic form of leadership. And dear colleagues, I think we are still privy to timocratic leadership, indeed, in our world. Well, here's the text. Let me read it to you, and then I will highlight a few quick things here. Matthew reads, or writes rather, Matthew 2, verses 1 to 10. And after Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea during the time of King Herod, remember I mentioned him earlier, Magi, wise people from the east, came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where's the one that was born King of the Jews? We saw a star in the east and have come to worship him." When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. When he had called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Christ was to be born. "In Bethlehem of Judea," they replied, "for this is what the prophet has written, but you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judea, are by no means least among the rulers of Judea, for out of you will come a ruler, a leader, who will be the shepherd of my people Israel." Then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time the star appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and make a careful search for the child. And as soon as you find him, report him to me so that you might too go and worship him." And when they had heard the king, they went on their way, and the star they had seen in the east went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. And when they saw the star, they were overjoyed. A number of quick things if one were to do a repetitive texture or repetitive progressive texture analysis, one could highlight potentially a number of things here. Firstly, note here that there is a quotation here in verse 6 that clearly describes Christ as a ruler, in contrast to Herod, who was a very narcissistic leader who killed most of his own family members, and later on in the story would go ahead and kill thousands of children as he searches for this child that was born. Note here that this older text that is referenced describes Christ not only as a child, but as a shepherd ruler or a shepherd leader. And later on, he is referred to as a child. I, of course, cannot go through the whole study with you, but in the paper that I wrote on this, I highlight the emphasis of this idea of a ruler that comes as a shepherd and as a child. Now, in the Hebrew tradition, in the Jewish tradition, from which Christianity came, this is not an unusual thought. In actual fact, there are 3 prophecies made in the book Isaiah, the prophetic book of Isaiah from the Hebrew scriptures, that describes the idea that a child will be born. This child will be indeed called Emmanuel, God with us. But also later on, it says, for to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government, rulership will be on his shoulders. He will be called a Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. And later on, another prophecy that said, the wolf will live with the lamb, the leopard will lie down with the goat, the calf and the lion and the yearling together, and a little child will lead them. From the study, I propose that, at least from the Christian position, there is an opportunity for us to lead like a child. And what does this mean? At least from this particular text, it speaks about the fact that leadership find its deepest dimension when it indeed is inspired. In this particular text, it is a child whose birth is foretold as a sign in the heavens. Secondly, leading with extraordinary humility. And there's nothing like a child when it comes to meekness and humility and indeed joy. So often we lose this, of course, as we continue to grow up and, in essence, often face our own mortality, and in doing so, create this narcissistic front that we often keep up. Thirdly, and this is the one that I really want to focus on, this idea of being follower focused. This particular text describes Christ as a shepherd that will take care of his flock. What would happen if we would have to have a leader that would not lead in order to find power, prestige, and privilege, but rather give herself or himself up in order so that her followers or his followers indeed would do better than him, that would lead them to a better place of joy, security, and indeed power. And lastly, folks, if there's one thing that is true about children, the opportunity to find joy in every single smallest situation. So today, I would like to propose that, at least from a Judeo-Christian perspective in its purest form, there is an approach to leadership that could be termed a childlike form of leadership, a leadership that is not obsessed with power, prestige, and privilege, but rather a leadership that is deeply not that find its deepest dimension in spirituality and inspired leadership, that leads with radical humility, that connects with followers, and ultimately brings great joy. In the Christian tradition, this child would grow up to become a leader that continues to inspire a billion people today and countless people from other religions as well. Dear colleagues, as we face, sorry, that's my timer, as we face a time of great insecurity and trouble in our world, may we recover a human-orientated approach to leadership that will bring forth a much better grounded form of leading in our common humanity that would lead to peace, security, and great joy. Thank you so much for the privilege.
Thank you so much, Dr. Becker. Thank you so much for that historical insight and context on the topic of joy and leadership. We are so thankful for you. I know Dr. Singh Sengupta, I'm sure you would like to thank him for a second as well.
Absolutely.
And also, I just want to very quickly apologize. In the earlier, I addressed you as Mr. instead of Doctor. I know you've worked hard for that title. So it's
Mr. is
Dr.
more than fine. Thank you. Like a child.
Thank you so much, Connie. It was wonderful. And I would like to say that even in Hinduism, this child perspective is very strong. And all the scriptures talk about keep your child alive. And that's how the great evolved souls in India, they have emphasized. And it was really amazing. And Isol Foundation promotes spiritual and harmony-based leadership styles. So it goes very well with our theme. And I'm so thankful and grateful to you, Connie, that you could make it to this Isol conference. And thanks to you once again.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. If Mr. Krishna Kumar, would you like to say a few words? You're mute.
Yeah. Hello. Namaste to everybody. Namaste is irrespective of time, day and date, and all constraints of and limitations of time. So it was a wonderful presentation. I would like to say that today, where the church stands in India and abroad, there needs to be a rethinking and a revival of the philosophy, as you have lastly come across. As far as Matthew's verses are concerned, I would like to tell you something. When St. Thomas came to Kerala, India, he carried with him a verses of Matthew's. And that is the basic scripture with which there was a cultural synthesis. Right. Matthew's, indeed, it is not church oriented, but it is human oriented, integrating philosophy of the Christianity, which has brought into India. And that is why Christianity became a part of the Indian traditions. And that is not found anywhere in India, in the world.
That's wonderful.
There is such a synthesis in this country which has happened, which was later destroyed by the British and the I can say to some extent by the Latinization. So we need to study on this process of Latinization and its impact in the modern what you call the socio-political context or taking from. So that is also a line of thinking which you have given to us today morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
What a wonderful privilege.
Thank you for that insight. I actually have one question from a member. For you, Dr. Becker, if you'd like to answer that. Let's see. Let me hold on.
Yeah, I got that, Anthony.
Oh, you
Yeah,
got
so
it. All right,
Dr. So, Dr. Becker, thank you for the presentation. It was really enlightening, and as a student from the psychology background, I could understand a lot of it. My only question is that how do you deal with the narcissism in the supposed godman sort of leaders, especially in Indian context? You know, we see them a lot, and who, in their very nature of serving people and getting the positive feedback, they eventually start to gloat in their ways of, you know, serving people and all the childlike characteristics that you just mentioned. And it eventually leads to a very toxic, narcissistic kind of a leadership. And people are, they kind of still remain intoxicated in that leadership, and they continue to follow them. And it doesn't really serve to benefit anyone eventually. So how do we handle that sort of a leadership and that sort of narcissism, and how can we prevent that?
Right.
Thank you.
There's an extraordinary Jewish philosopher that once described pride as madness, as a form of madness. And often what happens when there is the moment that we lose perspective, the moment that we are not able to see the people around us,
Yeah.
we partake of a certain form of madness.
Yeah.
And dear colleagues, may I say to you that humility is not a natural gift for most people. It is a gift that must be cultivated at all times. And in my mind, the greatest first step to humility is to have our eyes open. When our eyes are open and we see people outside of ourselves, and we are able to see the pain and the suffering within our world. A colleague of mine that teaches here in the School of Psychology and Counseling always says that when you encounter a lack of empathy in people, it is a sure sign of a spiritual disease. And that is quite true. And for me, the first step in leadership is to have our eyes open, our ears open, and our hearts open to those people around us as the first step of leadership. And this, I think, is where the image of a shepherd is so helpful, because shepherds can only be successful if they indeed care for the sheep. In the Christian tradition, Jesus said, the good shepherd lays down his life for his sheep. And it speaks about that kind of awareness. And but as leaders, we need to combat pride and arrogance and envy as prime enemies of good leadership by awareness, I think. I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that insight, Dr. Becker. And thank you for that question.
Can
Thank you so much.
Can I add a comment?
Oh, yes, please, Dr. Reiner.
Yeah, I have one observation that our inspirer, ISL inspirer, Ramakrishna, who has been a great saint and who has lived through various religions. Actually, he has lived his life for some time, whether it was Islam, whether it was Christianity, whether it was Hinduism and different sects of Hinduism. He has ultimately, yesterday, Sunita described it, Joto Mat, Toto Pat. He has described that there are all leading towards that man, that Almighty. Different sects may be there. So probably it will be in right perspective when we say that spirituality is the binding force of all this leadership. And that is where probably we are discussing today the post-COVID situation, because it is not COVID alone. There have been throughout the ages various disasters that mankind has faced, famines, such sort of diseases all throughout. It has been there, but probably man is turning towards self in terms of spirituality, and that is where probably the soul is lies. So I would compliment Dr. Baker for really bringing out some of the various aspects that can bind all these managerial traits through spirituality. So this is my comment, and thank you very much for the presentation that you have made.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Dr. Reiner.
Thank you for that comment, Dr. Reina. Again, thank you so much, Dr. Becker. We appreciate you for being here today and spreading some wisdom and knowledge with us. I'm going to allow us all to have a 5-minute break. You can think about some of that awesome wisdom Dr. Becker just spread with us, and we will return here in about just 5 minutes. So you guys can go ahead.
Dr. Baker, Dr. Jael Raina is our chairman, ISL Foundation. After the first conference in 2007 and the second in 2009 in Pondicherry, which we did in collaboration with Regent University, we formed this ISL Foundation. And since then, Dr. Jael Raina is the chairman. Mr. Krishna Kumar is esteemed core group member of ISL Foundation. Thank you. I thought of sharing.
Thank you so much.
Can I have a word, ma'am?
Sure.
Actually, the shepherd theory has something to do with the spirituality and the society.
Yeah,
Because what I find is that I have been a nomad for many times, so I understand that they are the biological, the nature's indicators. They understand the transitions in the nature, climate, environment, weather conditions are their masters of the nature. They master because they are the architects who have devised the survival through all times. When we talk about post-COVID time, the shepherd theory comes into prominence because there are shepherds in the deserts. If we talk about the Jesus time, it was Israel and many parts of the Egypt, there were desertification was there. So they survived through the desert. Second is that they are the possibly good assimilators and analyzers. When they take rest, I think Abrahamic theory comes from there itself. When they in the hot afternoons and evenings, when they sit under the tree, giving rest to the sheep, and that is the time they communicate with the spiritual, they have a spiritual communication. The Bible clearly says that, I think all theory, which all says that it is in loneliness that God communicates with you. Yeah. The spirituality has got a intimate connection with, and you remember that Krishna was also a cowherd. Okay.
Yes.
And he was a master yogi, Yogeshwara. No? So all these have got intimate intimacies, but we differ to disagree on conventions. Everything, there are similarities. The birth of Christ, and who are the people who went to first receive Jesus Christ when he was born? It was the kings of Kuja kings who saw the rising star and had an astrological prediction, and walked and reached Bethlehem from Kerala. These are some insights which we have to take into consideration.
Of course.
And I think it was a good initiation by him. I forget
Dr. Becker. Dr.
Yeah,
Becker have been working on biblical leadership style.
It is a wonderful thought for the day.
And he's a wonderful person as well. We have been old friends, and that's what, when I say that what lies inside you comes outside you. So.
Yes, he speaks volumes without saying. Madam, you can use this 5 minutes time.
Yeah, in fact, to continue with the shepherd theory, just to provide a counter perspective, sheep as herd and sheep as, not so intelligent a kind of a species. So how does this theory kind of, we apply it to humans, who are considered, more evolved in terms of their intelligence and so on.
If I may jump in here, so all metaphors are metaphors, and if we take them too far, they break down.
Yes.
And so the way that this idea of the shepherd leader, within the Jewish tradition, of course, King David was the shepherd leader as well. It's a long-standing metaphor for leadership in both Jewish and Christian traditions. And the little picture that I used on the slide is in actual fact the oldest statue of Jesus that presents him as a shepherd boy. And that's the reason why I particularly used that particular statue. But the focus here is very much on the attitude of what shepherds need to do: caring, protective, guiding, providing food. In the Jewish tradition, the epitome of this is in a psalm that's so well known around the world. The Lord is my shepherd. He makes me lie down. He gives me this.
Yes.
He provides healing to my soul. That's an area that I'm deeply interested in, how leaders bring healing to followers, spiritual and emotional healing.
Absolutely.
Because often leaders inflict damage. They don't necessarily bring healing. And what we're really interested in is, can we have followers and they time with us? Can they be healed? Can it be a place of healing? And that's, I think, where that shepherd motif comes into. I hope that helps.
Thank you for that question, Dr. Savannah, and thank you for that insight as well, Dr. Becker. I want to go ahead and move on with our conference just so everyone can have the chance to speak. But thank you all so much, and thank you all for joining us again. Those of you who took a second to leave for a second, we're going to move on and go to our first plenary session, and we will be introducing our session chair. That would be Jillian Avenado. I hope I got that correctly. And then the speaker for this session will be Dr. Sandeep Krishnamurthy. So just a little insight and background. Actually, I'm sorry, was Dr. Frazier, were you going to say something very quickly?
Yes, I just wanted to say hello to everyone. And from the FIU Public Policy and Administration Department, Pi Alpha Alpha, the FIU Museum, Dr. Stephanie Dosher is here from Global Learning and from COIL. I wanted just to say hello to everyone and thank you so much for joining us this evening. Jill is here representing the School of Business. I don't think our plenary speaker is here yet. So go ahead, Anthony, and tell us a little bit about Jillian, please.
Yes, I'll get right into her. But since we're on the topic, everyone, I work and have worked under Dr. Frazier for now going on almost 2 years, a year and a half, a while now. And I've seen firsthand the work that she has done. And I have never had a professor like her, a mentor like her, a teacher like her. She is excellent. And as a student, I could not be more grateful and proud. The work that she does for FIU's MPA as well as their BPA students is unmatched. I mean, I'm sure it is matched, but I haven't seen it myself. But she has a great body of work and she is a wonderful leader. So just very quickly on Dr. Frazier, thank you so much. And I would say is an awesome co-chair, but that's just my insight on it. But to Jillian, I want to give, did you want to say something, Dr. Sengupta?
I was saying that let's move to panel discussion because Dr. Sandeep Krishnamurthy is not here.
Okay, so I guess we're gonna switch around. We're gonna do our panel discussion, and that will be led by Dr. Singh Sengupta. She is our session chair for that. Oh, no, I'm sorry. That's for our researchers.
Stephen.
Our panel discussion is moderated by Dr.
Stephanie
Stephanie Dosher. And a little bit of insight on Dr. Stephanie Dosher. She is the director of Florida International University's Office of Global Learning Initiatives and is co-author of Making Global Learning Universal, Promoting Inclusion and Success for All Students, Stylus and NAFSA in 2018, a comprehensive handbook for engaging all undergraduates in collaborative global problem solving with diverse others. She hosts the Making Global Learning Universal podcast and leads FIU's collaborative online international learning initiative, the COIL program. Stephanie is also program evaluator for FIU's Title IX funding, Kimberly Green Latin American and Caribbean National Resource Center, is a faculty fellow with the Center for Leadership and serves on the editorial advisory board for AAC&U's Liberal Education. It is my honor to introduce Dr. Stephanie Dosher.
Good evening. Actually, it's my honor to be introduced by you, Mr. Wooten, because you are an excellent host. Thank you so much. I'm deeply appreciative of your energy. It really is very connective, and
Absolutely.
it engages all of us. So thank you. I'm so glad to be here this evening. Leadership is something that I have been passionate about and have been studying for many years. And I feel like I do have that child mind as a leader. So I'm so delighted to be part of this event so that I can learn. And I will definitely learn as part of this session. I think they chose amongst us the person who knows the least about Agile. So hopefully I will be able to enable us as a moderator all to learn from our panelists. So let me begin by sharing with you just a little bit of information about our panelists, and I will ask my panelists immediately to correct me if I am not pronouncing your name correctly, okay? Because I want to make sure that, that I do that. So please feel free to let me know. So first, I would like to introduce to you Dr. Bhuvan Unalkar, who is professor at the University of South Florida. He is a thought leader with 25 books, including The Art of Agile Practice and Big Data Strategies for Agile Business. And his research interests lie in the contribution of spirituality to peaceful organizational leadership. We also have with us today, who will be speaking, Andy Lyman, who is a leader in the software domain. He specializes in enterprise retail solutions using the Teamwork retail software. Andy serves as chairman of the board for All Point POS, a leader in retail point of service technology. He's delivered guest lectures, so he should be referred to as Professor Andy Lyman in the University of South Florida on the intersection of agility and leadership, and he currently serves as vice chair of the MUMA College of Business Advisory Council. And finally, we have joining with us today, Dr. Anurag Agarwal, who is full professor in the Department of Information Systems and Operations Management in the Lutgert College of Business at Florida Gulf Coast University. Anurag is well known for his research expertise in decision sciences. Anurag has deep interest in spirituality and its intersection with leadership. So we've decided that we would each like to take about 6 minutes to speak, and then we will gather in a space for questions and answers. And so let us begin with Dr. Anulkar first. If you wouldn't mind sharing your words with us for this fabulous 6 minutes.
So you want Anurag to go first, Dr. Dosher?
Oh no, I would like for you to.
Me to go first. That's fine. I got a bit confused, but that's okay.
As we had planned.
Absolutely. Okay, good. So, namaste to all my friends. I am sitting here in Bradenton, Florida, and that is not the reason why I'm giving a A plus plus to Dr. Stephanie Dosha for pronouncing all the names so brilliantly and introducing us so well. You wanted us to correct you, but hey, since you have done nothing wrong, we cannot correct you. Okay. Um, Spirituality is a word that seems to generate a phenomenal amount of debate. In fact, just yesterday I was chatting with some friends who, when they came to know that I am a part of this panel, said, define spirituality for us. And my answer was, tell me the smell of the color yellow. And their response was, what do you mean? And I said, exactly that. There are some dimensions in life, there are some elements in life that cannot be defined, and yet they exist. We haven't seen them, but we can infer. We have not seen an atom, and yet all the scientists agree that there is something called atom, which is by inference. We haven't seen black holes, and I had a astrophysicist come and stay here in my home, and for 3 months we discussed and debated. Black holes exist due to inference. Spirituality to me is a dimension of life that percolates, permeates, and enables every other dimension of life, but itself remains hidden. Therefore, I quite clearly differentiate between spirituality and religion. And in the curtain raiser, I had highlighted how spirituality is something like gravity, not really a theory. It's a direct practice, it's a direct experience. Our day to day breathing is spiritual because without the spirit, we cannot breathe. And that's just one example. So, coming to the topic of this particular panel, agile, the keyword agile is now very popular in business, in organizational leadership, and my two fellow panelists know as much, if not more, about the theory and the practice of agile. So, why is it that we are discussing agile and spirituality and data science in the same breath? We, the humans, we learn from what we know already. And construction is a 10,000-year old industry, and computing is a 60 or 70-year old industry. So those who were developing software solution learned or tried to learn from the construction industry and develop methodologies such as project management body of knowledge, Six Sigma, CMM, capability maturity model, and so on. The trouble was that these approaches were linear. In construction, we create the first floor first and then the second floor. In software solutions, sometimes the penthouse gets created first. So we needed a different approach, a radical approach, and a iterative approach, of which I'm sure my fellow panelists will talk more about. But agile as a method came about in year 2000, is well established, and is now getting applied not only in projects but also in day-to-day organizational work and leadership. My take on agile and spirituality is that throughout our history as humans, we have focused on doing things, and we cannot believe, we cannot accept that things can happen without doing. So we have the cause and the result. We are approaching everything scientifically. We have methods that are quantitative and qualitative. And one of my favorite authors that I had to study 35 years back when I was doing my research methodology study was Paul Feyerabend. And he has argued for anarchist theory of research, because he says if we are using quantitative and qualitative approaches, how have we proved that these approaches are also correct? And then he argues that some of the best discoveries, some of the best research, that the the sparks that have happened to researchers in the middle of the night when they were actually not following a quantitative or qualitative approach. So when we talk about following a methodology, when we talk about following a cause relationship, a cause effect relationship, we are focused on doing. Whereas spirituality, when it is understood, in my humble opinion, enables a lot more of happening, lot more of being. I was reading Aldous Huxley's experiments. I mean, he has experimented a lot and very widely, but one of the things Aldous Huxley experimented comes very, very close to the Hindu approach to life, which is enabling a lot of things to simply be. So in the agile that I have developed in the books and executive reports that I have published, I have encouraged project leaders, facilitators to let things happen. And this conference can be an example. There are things we are doing in this conference, and there are things that are happening. And we need to provide that margin. And once we do that and we learn the art of doing that, that's the title of my book, Art of Agile Practice. It was a tough job to introduce the word art in the engineering technology series by CRC Press, but the publisher finally agreed. And that's my take. To summarize what I have said in my opening statement, um, spirituality is all pervading. Spirituality does not have a theory, and therefore it cannot be defined. But because it cannot be defined does not mean it does not exist. It is very much there, like gravity. When we apply it in organizations, in projects, we bring in the concept of letting things happen, facilitation, servant leadership, which is the title for a scrum master in a agile project, and so on. So I will stop there. There is always a lot that one can talk about, but thank you for giving me the chance to present my thoughts. And now I'll be all ears. So namaste once again. Thank you.
Namaste. Beautifully said and beautifully timed. I had written down 7:35. So I would like to invite Professor Andy Lyman to speak for about 6 minutes.
I'm honored to be called professor, right? Because I flunked most classes I ever went to. Bhuvan and I are twin brothers. We're just separated by a generation or two. And when I showed up on Anurag's doorstep one morning when he flew into the United States from Sydney, Australia, I met my twin brother for the first time in a long time. There's a deep love and appreciation I have for Bhuvan. And we've gotten to know each other over the last 5 years. And certainly Professor Anurag and I have had deep conversations about spirituality. Certainly in America, where in many ways we were a spiritual desert over here, and we love, electing narcissists to be our leaders of our country. We're not alone in that. Certainly, other countries have made those mistakes, and unfortunately, that's almost a magnet. I really appreciated Dr. Becker's words on that. The words people, product, and process come to mind as I thought about this. And really, if we look at this, the people part of that is the most important part. If that is not right, it doesn't matter what product you have, it doesn't matter what process you have. Scrum, Agile, you can put any process in it. If the people part is broken, it doesn't matter the process. So the spirituality part is really that people. Whether you look at it from a spirituality standpoint or a human standpoint, somebody has to connect at some level with a human being to be able to get that psychological, emotional, physical buy-in for that team member to be able to pull together and work as a team. And in teams, that's where it all happens. Certainly Agile is there to pull that team together. But at the heart of that is a spiritual process. And when Bhuvan talked about that, I'm going like, I'm a simple American, right? We don't talk about spirituality in business. We're brute force business people out there, and I've been doing brute force business for 30 years. I cut my teeth at Silicon Valley. The biggest narcissist I've ever worked for was Steve Jobs. He was a tough guy. We worked on Next Step when he got kicked out of Apple the first time. And I tell you what, he's as bad as they all say he was. But there's a certain amount of brilliance that comes from that. But how do you tenor that with the people process to be able to pull that together? And you better have some strong spirituality people around you, right? Whether you call it spiritual people or not, you better have a support staff around that. Agile has certainly helped with that. We're in a pandemic now, and the whole world has had to be agile. I had to figure out an agile way to make up 30% of my revenue loss in my business since March. And I looked at my business partner in March and I said, okay, here we are. It's 2008, 2009 all over again, where we about went bankrupt, right? And all of us had to look. It's not just one segment of the world. Everybody had to look at this. The fear, the depression, the unknowing of what's going to happen. Am I going to be here? Is my friends going to be here? Is my coworkers going to be here? Is my government going to do the right thing in here? We're still not out of it, right? We're at this point, we're in vaccines, and we're starting to see countries fight over who's going to get the vaccine first and things like that. All of that grinds on the spirituality or emotions of people out there. All of that matriculates down into our employees, our coworkers. So those are factors that hit us spot on. And we certainly can support that with processes, and we need to have the right processes to support that. And that's kind of how I put those, as Professor Bhuvan, challenged me a couple of weeks ago, and we talked about this. It gave me a chance to reflect on this and really kind of, say, yeah, spirituality is really a big play at this. Whether we call it that or not, whether we live in a spiritual desert or not, whether we live in a religious system. I come from a Mormon background, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. One of the things they say in there is that we are the true church. Once you say that, it sets you up with a zero-sum game. And it's unfortunate because you're either in the true church or you're not in the true church. And that becomes the vocabulary of war at that point. I'm also a Rotarian, and I'm not active in church right now, but I'll be district governor next year, and Rotary has been at the heart and center of peace. And an organization like that can split the difference between a religion, a government, and get down into the human level and say, we have a connection of being human beings on there. So thank you so much. I'm humbled to be here. I have no credentials other than stumbling my way through business. So thank you so much.
And being a connecting human being, and we will definitely pick up on that word, because I think that is probably a through line. Dr. Agrawal, if you would share with us your thoughts.
Thank you, Stephanie. And you did a wonderful job of pronouncing my name. I usually ask my students to just call me Dr. A, and that way they cannot mispronounce or misspell my name. But you did wonderful. Thank you. And thank you all. It's an honor to be part of such a wonderful panel. And all the members, for the past 1 hour, I've been listening to wonderful ideas. And when Dr. Unhelkar was talking about us being the importance of being rather than doing, I saw Stephanie's comment that we are human beings, not human doings. That was very appropriate. There's another statement about human beings that I'm sure you've all heard of, given by a famous French philosopher, Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. And I may be mispronouncing, but French names are difficult to pronounce. He said, "We are not a human being having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience." Sometimes we say, I had a spiritual experience, as if basically I'm a human being and I had the experience. But Pierre Teilhard is saying just the opposite. So this statement is actually pretty deep. We can either believe in this, but if we believe in this, it's just a belief. We don't actually know that. Or we choose to not to believe in this, in which case we'll never know if it is true or not. Or we can neither believe or not believe and try to see if it's true. So that's a striving. So that becomes your spiritual striving. And if we go that route, the third route of neither believing nor not believing, we may realize that it is true or not. Either way, you remain a seeker. But if you do realize that it's true, then it changes everything. It changes our whole perspective of how we've been living. Then we cannot say that, oh, I had a spiritual experience. Well, you were spiritual to begin with. That's your underlying base. So you cannot say that happened to me on top of who I am. So it's a very profound statement, one that you cannot just ignore because of the depth of this statement. So as human beings, we all want to feel fulfilled. But if spirituality is at the base, unless we have this realization, we will never feel fulfilled. And we spend so much time in organizations that unless our personal goal of realizing this statement aligns with organization goals, we remain, as individuals, we remain unfulfilled. And you can imagine how an organization will do that is made up of individuals who are not feeling fulfilled. That organization is not going to do very well. So neither the individuals feel fulfilled nor organizations unless the goals are aligned. So I'm very happy that this dialogue is happening in this conference and in this panel. And that people are talking about aligning or integrating spirituality with organizations. And talking about agile, like Dr. Unhelkar said, the old projects were done in a waterfall approach, in a linear fashion. That did not work for software. Software required agile, constant change. And also, along with constant change, the focus was on individuals and interactions rather than very organized way of doing things. So in COVID times, post-COVID times, like Professor Lyman was saying, you need to be agile and make changes. So both spiritual integration and responding to changes quickly using agile approaches are so important for today's organizations. Because agile, in addition to being responsive and focusing on individuals, it focuses on value. So it's value driven. And unless the values of all individuals are taken into account, there's not much value being offered. It also talks about simplicity of design, self-organized team, acceptance of change. All these values and principles of Agile apply to organizations just as well as they apply to software development projects. So I can hardly overemphasize the importance of the spiritual elements and agile elements to organizations. Thank you.
Thank you so much for for making my mind go on fire. I will say that I have many questions myself that I would like to pose, but I would like to open it to the floor first. We have a question here from Dr. Frazier regarding this concept of value. I'm wondering if that might have prompted your question. Nikki, would you like to share a little bit more about your question?
I was just thinking how I came before I came into academia. I came from corporate America and worked for a Fortune 100 company. So as I was listening to my esteemed colleagues, I was thinking, so how does, we're taught about capitalism, right? How to drive revenue, how to make a profit. How can capitalism allow spirituality in? That's simple a question.
So if permitted, I might go first, and then the two better panelists than me will be able to comment on. I have actually talked about how the existence of a stock market is anti-agile. And I have also argued, including in academic papers, that so long as the stock market exists, authentic agile cannot happen, because agile is based on values that Dr. Agarwal highlighted, such as trust and honesty and simplicity and courage. And the agile manifestos, the very first statement is individuals and interactions over processes and tools. So agile is a team sport, and any team sport, whether it is football or hockey or cricket, cannot be won by a single person. And capitalism is entirely based on competition. And we actually coach humanity from kindergarten onwards to be competitive. And if there is one single strong feeling I have, that is to be anti-competitive. And I cannot be anti-competitive in the same vein as being competitive. So it requires a dimensional difference. To answer Dr. Fraser's question, you questioned directly, Dr. Agarwal mentioned something very beautiful just now, and that is we are not humans with spirituality, we are spiritual entities with humans. So being human is the part of the experience we are getting, but we go back to being spiritual. And that means anything and everything we do, not just capitalism, but any music, sports, business, academic, research, coronavirus, everything has a underlying base of spirituality. The thing is, we narrow it down, we make it into a robust, well defined entity. This is my business, and this is I, the ego, and the whole neurosis starts. The ultimate goal for all of us, whatever we do, is to be happy. And again, it was Professor Lyman, my dear twin brother Andy. He is highlighting the keyword people in people, processes, and technologies. And whether it is capitalism or communism or socialism or anarchy, it's all done by people. So I don't think that capitalism and spirituality are exclusive to each other, because spirituality is the base. The problem, of course, is capitalism is entirely based on competition. A footnote to all of this is that the country in which I am sitting, and the one that I love as much as I love mother country India and Australia, this is one country which has made the maximum contribution to humanity's challenges, including the current pandemic, including Rotary that Andy Lyman talked about. Rotary has gone around the world with End Polio now, which started here in America. And this is the most capitalistic country in the world. So I don't see that capitalism itself is a barrier to spirituality, so to speak. But we need to be intelligent human beings rather than human doings. That's my take. I would now love to listen to Dr. Agarwal and Professor Lyman. Over to you.
So I love systems that are self-corrective systems. And let's just take the simple simple concept of people, product, and process. If one of those three, right, it's almost like the fire triangle. You can't have fire unless you have three elements. You will not have a product unless you have happy people. And we have human resource departments. We might as well call them human spiritual departments, right? But that is politically non-correct way to call them. So if people are not happy at Apple, they will leave and go someplace else. If people are not happy someplace else, as long as the element of freedom is in there, we can keep a simple process like that intact and keep capitalism in check. As soon as that freedom is removed out of there, then we start to, mess with the system in there. So I think at the core of it, we have to raise our standards of spiritualism or human resources or whatever we want to call that, to have better products and to have better processes around that, and they all work as three. So great question, Dr. Nikki.
Do we have some other questions in amongst our audience before I start in with mine? Because I if I may, I would love to think about one of the points that I've heard discussed, which is around connection, and the fact that by nature we are human beings, not human doings. And I wonder if you have had the opportunity to read a text called Leadership and the New Science. This is a work that's based on quantum mechanics. Yeah. And so this is a quantum view of leadership that is based on self-organizing systems, emergence at an atomic level, at a subatomic level. Yeah. So so there, Meg Wheatley is talking about emergent systems and organizations at that subatomic level, and at our scale, we're talking about human scale. One of the things that Wheatley talks about in terms of self-organizing systems and emergence is that communication is the stuff of emergence. Communication is the stuff of evolution. Through communication, we find this strange attractor, that creates something that looks like an organization on the outside. So now my question to you has to do with communication and information, and how this impacts Agile in a post-COVID era, when we don't have the opportunity to be face-to-face. What kinds of communication are we lacking in this space that we need to try to find new solutions for? What maybe are new kinds of communications you think that are available to us that we haven't been using? Any thoughts on communication and Agile? in a post-COVID space?
Although I have unmuted my mic, I would give the privilege to either of my two esteemed panelists if they would like to go first.
Go ahead, Bhuvan.
Andy, you can go if you wish.
Well, I mean, communication is one of the pillars of leadership. I mean, there's 4 pillars out there, and communication is key, right? If you can't write, if you can't communicate through a verbal communication on there, you're going to have a very difficult time being a leader on that. You've got to inspire people through that. So that's really the glue to get your message across inside there. Whether we like it, that's been a very difficult time for me as I've been training my Rotarians, especially, is to be able to feel that communication process through this screen. The screen, I can see, I can't feel you, right? I can see you, I can see some head nodding, but there are some connections there when people are in the room feeling each other's, whether you call it spirit, energy, whatever you want to call it on that. It's very different communication process. And there's, books written upon how to do this effectively and things like that on there. But communication is critical. Bhuvan, I know you've
Yeah,
got thoughts.
I think the entire agile is actually based on communication. In a agile project or in an agile organization, the one thing they definitely have is a Kanban board. A Kanban board is a visible board on which user stories are written and around which the project members or the team members gather together every morning for 15 minutes, and even the meeting that they have is called a daily stand up. So the communication is institutionalized in one way and made sure that it is not only at formal level but also informally. People, I mean, when I teach agile to my MBA class, the first thing that they realize when that this course is different is when I tell them that in their daily stand up they have to make eye contact. I want each team member, each student to have eye contact with the remaining 5 or 6 or 7 team members. This is a learning thing for us as humans. Communication, I had read somewhere, I'm not sure about this the stats, but when 2 or more people communicate as we are communicating, only 10% is through words, 30% is through the tone of voice, and the remaining 60% is the being, the aura, the what Andy Lyman described as the, you can call it the spiritual aspect. And we experience that in classrooms. In fact, today, even today, after having grown in age and a little bit in maturity, I go back to my hometown and I touch the feet of my school teachers, the traditional Indian bow, and they say, why? And I say, not because you taught me English or mathematics or Hindi, but because of who you were. The aura of the teacher is in me, and that is why I am grateful to them. So, in fact, telling or calling agile as something new or something like a silver bullet is ridiculous. We humans are always iterative, we are always incremental. I was giving another example to some friends. In Hindi, which is the national language of India, of course, there are other national languages also in India, but in Hindi, yesterday is referred to as kal, and tomorrow is referred to as kal, exactly the same word and the same pronunciation. And that tells us a lot about the culture, about the society, about the spiritual viewpoint of life over there. Time is considered cyclic, time is considered iterative. And therefore, in India, we have sometimes treated as joke, my American friends will say, we have 7 lives and we are married to the same girl 7 times. My wife says this is the 7th marriage that we are having. That's a joke, by the way. The idea is that we are, through our spirit, we are intuitively iterative and incremental. And if you talk about agile, if you talk about communication, it has to be iterative and incremental. So it really gels. Communication, two concluding points. One is always effective when it is iterative and incremental. And two, communication through words is actually a very poor form of communication. Not that it's wrong, it is just never sufficient. In fact, I will add one more examples. My American friends, when they went, some of my friends, my Rotarian friends, when they went to Australia, they went in the outback. And the outback is where, for hundreds of miles, there's no water, no tree, no nothing. And there are native Australian communities there. And my friends were telling me that the native Australian communities, the people there said that we're going to have 6 more people coming for dinner this evening. And there's no communication. And then my American friends told me that they realized that actually the native Australians uh, would put their ears to the ground and sense that there are 6 more people coming. Now, there is so much of communication in this universe happening that we don't even understand, and not able to appreciate fully. But word based communication is necessary but not sufficient, and I entirely agree with Andy Lyman's comment that we are right now seeing only the upper half of ourselves, and the entire us is the one that forms the aura. Thank you.
Truly.
Can I intervene? I have an observation taken from Andy Lyman, who said about self-corrective measures. And this is what in our initiatives at Isol Foundation, we try to explore and understand how do we develop these self-corrective measures by going inside and working outside. So, and the second point for Dr. Stephanie Dosher picked up was building connections, and what Professor Bhuvan Unhelkar very beautifully analyzed, and also Professor Anurag Agarwal. This connection, establishing connection, is what we talk about spirit-centric approach, which Dr. Konibecker also mentioned, and which is what even in my researches, I used participatory observation method, attended church, attended Chishti Dargah, attended Gurudwara, and attended temples. And I saw this spirit is same everywhere. And that spirit became the foundation of all the conceptualization. So I thought that just sharing that how well it goes with the initiative undertaken by Isol Foundation. And I'm very thankful to the insights that the panelists gave. Thank you. That's all. Up to Dr. Dosh.
Thank you for sharing those thoughts. As a closing question, well, I also asked in the chat if our panelists would share any resources that you would like to share with us, because many of us are probably more interested in Agile. But one of the things in my brief reading about Agile that I found was this concept. One of the principles, the 12 principles, is the concept of motivated individuals, of motivated people. Yeah. And there was a quote that I read that we build projects around motivated individuals. We give them the environment and support that they need, and then trust them to get the job done. And for me, when I was reading about Agile, that concept of trust really rang to me around the relationship between that and spirituality and faith. Yeah. So I'm just curious how, if you could comment on your observations around trust. How do we observe it? How do we know it's happening? How do we show that we're trusting to others?
Anurag, you go first. I trust you.
That's a wonderful question, not very easy to answer. But in my project management class, what I do is have the students do a project, an information system project, using the traditional approach, the non-agile approach. And then I keep the same group and make them do another project using the agile approach. So they can see the difference in how the teams operated with the same team. So that's a constant. And invariably, they find that the agile methodology worked so much better than the traditional. And you were talking about communication. Because of daily stand-ups, communication is, like Dr. Unhelkar said, is institutionalized. They cannot not communicate because you have to meet every day, mandatory. And my students, they have never had a project, a class project to do in which they had to meet every day, never. And I thought they would not be very happy with me that I'm making them meet every day. But I just saw my teaching evaluations and they were so happy with the agile project. They thought it worked so great. So communication was institutionalized, was built in. And because every day you have to report what you did in the last 24 hours, you automatically become motivated to do, because you got to report tomorrow morning in front of everybody that last 24 hours I did this, this, and this. And others are trusting you for it. So when you are trusted, you become trustworthy. If you're not trusted, you may not become trustworthy. So it's not even trustworthiness is institutionalized in the agile approach, and that's the beauty of that. So it's not just incremental deliverables, but so many other principles that are institutionalized in the agile approach.
Wow. I think that is a fascinating spot where we'll need to pause. But what the meaning of what you just said is that spirituality is baked in terms of trust, communication, respect, reflection, connection. That these attributes of what we would say a spiritual experience is made up of, how we would describe it, are baked in to the agile methodology. And it gives us not so much a religion, but certain benchmarks, right? A map, if you will, for the process. And once we learn to trust that process, all of this value, this values-based value is produced. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and all of the connections that all of us made to different readings that we've made, different methodologies that we're familiar with. This has been a really, I've learned a ton from you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Andy, you would like to say something?
No, it's just, I can never keep up with Anurag. He is the most beautiful, guy who pulls all that stuff together as a philosopher on there. I am much more an instinctual, ground and pound type of guy on there. But the only last thought I had on that to put in there is I'm never amazed at the employees that if I can find that hungry, humble, smart employee that has the background to can absorb the information and you empower them, it is an amazing experience to see. And I'm startled when I bring in these top-notch resume-built employees that fail and you get an employee like that. That's an amazing experience. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you all so much.
I'll turn it back over to.
Oh no!
Thanks.
Oh, thank you, thank you so much. Thank you to all of you, each and every one of you. I love how connected you all were. It seemed like you were piggybacking off each other, and it seemed like you created a wonderful. Not seemed like you created a wonderful environment. And also, that was a great note to leave off of, Professor Lyman, because me as a student myself, it's nice to hear that there are people, employers, leaders out there that believe in you and believe in what you're contributing, and not so much of just all of those technicalities. So it's highly inspirational to you all. Thank you all so much for being here, and thank you so much, Dr. Dosher, for doing an excellent job at moderating. You definitely got me excited and engaged, and you kept us on our toes. You kept those questions coming, and you did a wonderful time managing time. So thank you so much to all of you. We're going to take a short break. I know that was a lot of information, a lot of things to think about. We're going to take a brief 5-minute break. So any of our presenters or anyone, please take that time, do what you need to do. We will return here in 5 minutes. Thank you all.
We can use these 5 minutes. And I really liked Andy's concluding words where he said, humbled, hungry employee.
And smart.
And smart.
And smart.
And though I don't believe in smartness, I believe in hard and sincere work. So, but humbleness was what caught my attention, which is very important. It is very important. And that's how, that's how the aura, what Professor Unhelkar said very beautifully, the aura. Management book is silent on aura, but we experience aura, and aura needs to be spread. It comes
I think
automatically.
management books are silent on any aspect of life which cannot be measured. And aura is something that has no metrics to it. And therefore, they don't want to talk about it. In fact, that's why my focus in Agile is that it is an art form rather than a engineering or rigorous process.
Yeah, I'll get back to you, Professor Unhelkar. We would like to do one exclusive conference on agility because it comes very closer, because the areas that our current focus is operations, finance, and information technology, where we can integrate spirituality and talk about
Absolutely. And
yeah.
I know Professor Lyman, who is also a owner and president of All Points POS, has actually done so much work in DISC personality assessment, Myers-Briggs personality assessment, various psychological metrics. I mean, there wasn't enough time for him to talk today, but for the conference that or the event that you are planning,
I'll get
yeah,
back to you on this.
yeah,
Yeah, or to you and perhaps Professor Agarwal and Andy Lyman all can form a team, and then we can work together.
we will be delighted.
Yeah.
My pleasure. Anyone who would like to ask any question from ISOL, Mr. Krishna Kumar, or any other member?
I wanted to know, what book would you recommend for us students to read so we can understand better the concept of agile, the practice of agile practicing?
Sorry, I meant it more like a joke because this is the book I have written, and
Okay.
if I have no desire of promoting my book unless you're not able to sleep properly at night, and in that case, you can open any page of this book, and I guarantee you will fall asleep. All my students do, but on a on a serious note, it depends on whether it is the organizational aspect or the software development aspect that you are looking for. There is a phenomenal amount of material online. I invite you to look at scrum.org. I invite you to look at agilemanifesto.org. And I invite you to connect with me, and offline, feel free to ask me questions. I'll be happy to share with you material. Dr. Agarwal has also been teaching Agile, so he has some good references, and then there are some good tools also available in which can be used. So Jira comes to mind, Jira, which is a tool by Atlassian. Rally, RALLY, is another tool. That those are agile tools in projects, used in projects. Thank you.
Dr. Bhuvan, I did some work with in computers on a priori algorithm for eliciting user requirements, because we are talking about communication. And as I listened to you, I realized that how that algorithm, how much that algorithm uh, is not capable of yielding about the user requirements, because as you said, the spoken words or the written words and the stories that emerge, they are just about a 1/3 of the iceberg. Is it not? Because there's a lot surface. Are there any softwares that capture the hidden information on the user requirements, for example, in software development?
Well, the whole PMBOK, that is project management body of knowledge, and other methodologies came about because we could not capture the requirements sufficiently. We don't even know whether the requirements have all been captured or not.
Mhm.
So Agile was a revolution because it said, let's not wait for all requirements to be fully captured. Let us start with a small slice of the requirement that can be fully delivered as a functional piece of software. Once we do that, the users
Through a
get to
process of
see that
iteration.
and provide you with a response, and that's how you build the software. So there are no tools that I know of that will capture the unexpressible part, but the method, there is agile, like there is scrum and crystal and dsdf. There are quite a few methods, and I have talked about composite agile in my book because all the IT people are happy with agile, and all the accountants and lawyers in a bank or a airline or a hospital where agile is implemented are very unhappy because they all work based on extensive documentation. So there is a
Yes.
need for this balance. I'll be happy to chat with you, sir,
Sure,
offline.
sure,
Then we'll have more time, but
sure,
very relevant question.
sure.
Yes, thank you, sir. Thank you.
We are going to get back to the remainder of the conference. Really quickly, I wanted to make sure, oh, there she is, awesome. Make sure Miss Jillian was there for us. But all right, everyone, welcome back. I hope you got everything done that you needed. We're gonna go ahead and dive deep into our next part of our conference. We are going to have a presentation from Miss Jillian Avenado. A little insight, a little info about Miss Avenado. She serves as the program director for the Center for International Business Education and Research at Florida International University, overseeing the activities of the $1.1 million cyber grant from the U.S. Department of Education. Prior to working at FIU, she worked for almost 10 years at Panorama Travel, a corporate travel management company, as a special accounts executive, where she coordinated travel for businesses and faculty and students from universities and companies around the globe. While at Panorama, she also worked with their nonprofit sector as an international programs coordinator, organizing and traveling on sustainable and impactful service learning programs in Nicaragua. She also worked for almost 5 years as a business development specialist for Carnival Cruise Lines. Jillian earned her BA in International Relations and her MS in Education in International and Intercultural Education at FIU. She loves to travel and has a passion for all things related to international education, as her resume has shown us, international relations, and international business. It is my honor to introduce Miss Jillian Avenado.
Thank you, Anthony. You're so wonderful. I've enjoyed listening to you these past couple of days. I was going to say, isn't this amazing that post-COVID, we're now opening our homes and our spaces up for these types of interactions with people from around the world. Even though we could have done it prior to this, maybe we wouldn't have thought about doing it. So I think it's just something we're very special that we can all connect in this way. And, you know, to further talk about the connection here, I wanted to say how I ended up in the place that I'm in talking here at this wonderful conference. So with the Center for International Business Education and Research, one of the initiatives that we support in this program is the Collaborative Online International Learning, or COIL, which many of you may have heard about before, and if you haven't, definitely something that you should look into. It's really amazing. So Dr. Sunita Singh Gupta and Dr. Nikki Frazier have recently joined forces and coiled their courses together. And we ended up making this connection because our group from our center went on a faculty development and international business trip to India. And Dr. Singh Gupta was an amazing host to the group, and as he visited her university, and she said she wanted to find ways to connect with FIU and its faculty and to really collaborate and work together. And that's how this all came together. So this is something very beautiful that you both have created, and I'm really happy to see it and happy to be a part of it. To give you a little bit more information about the center that I work for, as Anthony mentioned, I'm the program director for the Center for International Business Education Research. We are one of 6 centers in the US. We're a Title VI grant from the US Department of Education, with the main purpose to be promoting US competitiveness in international business. And we do that in ways of COIL, supporting COIL projects, faculty research, K through 12 languages for business programs that we run, scholarships for study abroad for students, which are not really happening right now, but we're looking at ways to do it virtually. We support international internships, which have now gone virtual as well. And we also run a couple different programs in faculty development, which you all are invited to come if you'd like. We just recently ran one for 5 days. It finished today with the culmination of a virtual trip to the Taj Mahal, but it was a professional development and international business program in India. We've run the program for many years, but this is the first time we've tried to do it virtually. And it's a challenge. We wondered if it was going to be impactful and if people would relate to it and if it would be worth their time and spending the 5 days with us. And it really turned out to be something really great, as I see this conference being as well, that people were able to connect, share ideas, think about ways to collaborate in the future, and really learn things that they could bring to their classrooms or bring to their research. And that's what's going on here with all these things that we're doing virtual. So I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you all. I really have learned a lot so far in listening to everyone speak about their areas. And if you would like to learn more about our program, please feel free to visit our site. I'm going to try and share my screen. I don't know if it'll work, but our website is cyber@fiu.edu. I'll post it here. And we also have been posting a lot lately on our social media, which we do Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, all of these things. And trying to keep it updated with all the different programs and opportunities that we have. We have some upcoming webinars. We're working on a program that'll be a virtual professional development international business program for South Korea. And we're working on our program for India, which we hope will be in person next year. We're just working on, let me see if I can share the screen, and then I'll let someone else take. I know that, we have a lot of speakers and maybe limited time, but here's our website. It gives a little bit of information. We're a resource to the community And we're always available to help share information and help fund certain projects that are related to the grant initiatives. So thank you very much. How do I unshare? Here we go, stop share, sorry. But it's, I added in the chat box the website if anyone would like to take a look at it and see what we do. And thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing, Ms. Avendano. And also thank you so much for the work that you put into the students here at FIU. Me being one of them, I am greatly appreciative of it. And thank you for all of your efforts. And also thank you for sharing that resource, that website.
Were you part of the COIL program?
I was just going to mention, I got to be a recipient.
About that.
Yeah. Yes, I was.
I feel like everyone should do it. And Stephanie Dosher, who you all have heard from, she is the guru of COIL. Without her, we wouldn't be able to be so successful with the program at FIU. She's really a great mentor to everybody who is coiling and really helping to make connections and grow the relationships that the two universities have together. And
yes, yeah, I completely agree. From, a little anecdote from the COIL program, my partner who was teamed in India, I went through a family loss during COVID, and we were actually able to bond during that loss. Someone who I had never met 6 weeks ago was helping support me and encourage me to uplift me that I would have never, turned to. And I was so appreciative and grateful. And it's situations like that, lectures like this, conferences like this, that are the reason behind that. So thank you for the work that all of you have put into the COIL program and to this conference within itself. We want to go ahead and get into our next session, which will be our speakers who submitted research essays on different topics, and were actually chosen to present today, which we're super grateful for. We're thankful for everyone who engaged and who submitted anything. I don't exactly know how the review process was. I didn't take part in it myself, but I know that Dr. Sin Gupta and the team enjoyed reading all of you who contributed, and are super proud and super honored to present some of the work that many of you have put into today. The leader of the session chair will be Dr. Sunita Singh Sengupta. So I'll go ahead and hand it off to you if you'd like.
Thank you, Anthony. This is the session on research paper presentation. We received many abstracts, but after the screening, we have these 4 presentations today. Mr. Amarjeet from Faculty of Management Studies, Mr. Akshay Kumar from Faculty of Management Studies, Ms. Surabhi Dhingra, she is Associate Professor at Delhi University, and we have Dr. Poonam Sethi, Associate Professor in Commerce at Hindu College. So we'll have these 4 presentations now, and the allotment of time is that each speaker can speak to 6 minutes. Since there are 5 speakers, one could not turn up. So that time you can get. So each speaker speaking for 6 minutes. And we'll start first with Akshay. Then we'll go to Amarjeet, and then Surabhi, and then we go to Poonam. So Akshay.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Is it audible?
Have you entered from 2 devices? It's echoing.
Oh, just a second, ma'am. Okay, is this screen viewable?
Yeah, it's good.
Okay, thank you so much, ma'am. I would like to specially thank Professor Sunita Singh Sengupta to assist and guide me in conceptualizing this framework. So my topic is entitled Integrating Spirituality into Financial Decision Making. So to begin with the problem statement, the prevalent inequality, glorification of greed, empathy for society and future generations, gambling moral values and virtues, and feudal mindset. They all are accredited to various white-collar crimes and the financial crisis in the corporate world. Now, the organizations in the postmodern era are distracted from the spiritual path filled with the spirit of fraternity, brotherhood, and collaboration, wherein the decision-making authorities are contemplated as the parental guides. Now, these financial frauds or white-collar crimes have compelled the corporate world to question the paucity of values on the part of these organizational leaders. The notion of spirituality supports people to live an original life, thereby endorsing meaningful associations, asserting the spirit, and looking beyond egoism. Develop consciousness and embrace interconnectedness. On fundamental grounds, spirituality is regarded as a multivariate construct, which I propose here to be constructed of self-transcendence, meaningfulness, interconnectedness, and innerness. If I may borrow a few words from Professor Sunita Singh Sengupta herself, spirituality at workplace is the awakened consciousness of one's roles and responsibilities to connect with different stakeholders with compassion and love in order to serve the organization and focus on purpose and honesty in expression. Now, the rationale to connect the spirituality into the workplace sphere has been laid down in literary evidences. Name a few. So post-analysis of the aforementioned concern and the rationale of the workplace spirituality, I have put forth few of the propositions. So organizations that inculcate spirituality into the workplace are more likely to demonstrate morally acceptable attitudes and behavior in the financial industry. Now, structurally, organizations that demonstrate morally acceptable attitudes and behavior in the financial industry are less likely to manifest financial frauds. So the proposed construct of the financial decision making, which is the other aspect of my research, is comprised of four perspectives: intergenerational dilemma, moral dimensions, intuitionism, and the financial decision making models, wherein intergenerational dilemma is designated by intertemporal and interpersonal perspectives. So to straight away jump to the propositions from intergenerational dilemma, moral reciprocity might outperform intergenerational reciprocity when empathy with the previous generation is low. Herein, the reciprocity pertains to the allocation of benefits or burdens by the present decision makers onto the future others. If intergenerational empathy is favorable, then larger intertemporal distance may increase the sense and power of the preceding generation's conduct for the future generations. So in consonance, businesses that encompass moral uprightness similar to compassion are expected to experience material gains also. Out of the study of intuitionism, I propose organizations that flourish an awareness of spiritual self permit the workforce operationalize moral intuitions in a decision-making framework. Now, two of the models that I propose here, Anglo-American, which strives to maximize the shareholders' wealth, while continental European Japanese model, which is a other regarding perspective, which undertakes the concern of all the stakeholders and strives to maximize the overall corporate wealth. So I put forth the composition of Anglo-American and continental European Japanese models that facilitate financial decisions has a significant influence on sustainability and prosperity of the financial institutions. So my next proposition is a well-explained corporate guiding statement has implications for better communicating the financial and spiritual considerations. So next fourth, highly successful organizations, these propositions are specifically in the context of Indian industry. So highly successful organizations, according to Fortune India 500, most admired companies have significantly higher ratings on reputational attributes, and constructively, highly successful organizations in the Fortune India 500 most admired companies have their guiding statements that significantly support both the aspects. This is the proposed conceptual framework in the construct of spirituality and the construct of financial decision making. A blend of both is going to initiate the moral orientation of selffulness. Selffulness pertains to the reasonable selflessness and reasonable selfishness. So these are the two of the moral orientations, which is envisaged organizational prosperity and sustainability. This is the conceptual framework on the basis of which I have proposed the propositions earlier. Now, to conclude up with, inherent spiritual values are indispensable in managerial decision making in the contemporary corporate world, which cannot simply be dumped outside of the office gates. So, I mean, in the decision making phase, the incorporation of the values has become indispensable. That is quite inherent. Now, these are the proposed limitations and the future implications for my work. The common limitation that arrives out of the conceptual study is to empirically test for the validation. And therefore, the proposed assertions can be tested through hypothesis setting. So thank you very much. Thanks to all.
Thank you very much, Akshay, for a very good time management. Now, we can take up questions towards the end. Now, I request Mr. Akshay Kumar to do his presentation. Sorry, Amarjeet.
Very nice. Good morning and good evening to all of you. I'm very exciting to present my topic, my research paper. So title of this research study, Supply Chain and Logistic Management, Integration of Leadership and Spirituality as a Case Study of Dandi March. So let's start with the introduction. Whenever we talk about supply chain and logistic management, so all the conceptual framework based on the logical reasoning, mathematical calculation, economic concept on the ground of rationality assumption. So in this study doesn't challenge this basic fundamental assumption, but want to add the leadership and spiritual dimension of supply chain and logistic management. Next is objective. So fundamental objective of this study is to explore the role of leadership and spirituality in supply chain and logistic management. So for that, I have taken the case study of Dandi March. So allied objective of this study is to review the Dandi March and find out the factor for the sustainable supply chain and logistic management. So we can see the picture of Dandi March. In the center of the point, the main is Mahatma Gandhi, our father of our nation. Let's talk about the RM part. So this study is qualitative in nature and based on the secondary source of data. This case study on Dandi March has used to find out the role of leadership and spirituality and the behavioral dimension in supply chain and logistic management. So overview of Dandi March, this also known as Salt March, Salt Satyagraha, was an act of non-violent civil disobedience in colonial India, led by Mahatma Gandhi with his team of 80 members. This 24-day march lasted from the 12th March 1930 to 6th April 1930. Is a direct action campaign of tax resistance and non-violent protest against the British salt monopoly. So we can see the route. It started from the Sarvati Ashram to the Dandi, and Gandhiji very smartly make the resistance point or the west point with this behavioral psychological factor. So we will discuss this everything in the finding part. So finding of this study or finding of this case study. An understanding of Dandi March. Dandi March logistic planning is based on the understanding of the nature and structure of logistics. That is the art of command based on the culture, ethics, and value. So this study presented few factors that would make Dandi March as a successful logistic and supply chain management. So in Indian culture, salt is a symbolic term and it means loyalty. So Gandhi, Mahatma Gandhi ji, beautifully or smartly selected the salt act to spark the civil disobedience movement. So it's also represent the unity because it is necessary for all religion and class of society. So again, this is the smartness. This is the lens that we need to require right now to create the sustainable supply chain management. Next factor is trust. All the people, those have connected with the Dandi March movement, they had trust on the Gandhi ji and they were fighting against the injustice. So trust is the one of the major factor for creating sustainable supply chain management and logistic management. Integration of objective. Whenever goal of the all people were integrated to fight against the injustice and exploitation. Similarly, quality of leadership. Gandhiji, transformational leadership quality had harmonized the goal of people. And then spiritual environment, means spirituality. The song Raghupati Raghav Rajaram had used in the Dandi March to spread the spiritual flavor in the crowd and connect the soul of all individuals with the objective. And that last not least is patriotism. People had great love for the country and it was the one of very important factor for the success of Dandi March movement. So conclusion of this study, Dandi March provide us many factors like culture, unity, trust, collective objective, leadership, spirituality, and patriotism. And these factors are very important for the sustainability of supply chain and logistic management. So thank you so much to all. And if you have any question, I'm here to give the answer.
We'll take up questions at the end. Wonderful presentation, Amarji. Great presentation. Now, may I request Dr. Surabhi Dhingra to do her presentation.
Good morning and good evening to all of you. And I think the very fact that we are all here together, and I am here especially, was Professor Sunita Sen Gupta having organized the UKERI conference on research methodologies last year, which got Professor Anand Saxena and so many of us together, Rohit, Avilasa, everybody was there that year managing the conference. And here we are as a result of that today. So thanks so much for this opportunity.
Thank you,
I'll do a little screen share and okay, I hope you're able to see my screen now. The topic that I have chosen is on the work that I do, and the work that I do is around the Law on Sexual Harassment of Women at Workplace Act. But is that in letter or is that in spirit? Was the question that arose in my mind when I started working on this for this conference also. And since I work on that, I see that I've divided the paper for now in 3 sections. The first is just the POSH legislation, which has come in 2013 in India, which lays the full onus on the employers rather than the women, as was the case earlier. And I think Professor Newman has yesterday she set the base for me when she talked about the differences in gender and how it percolates so deep into everything that we do for organizations as well. In the second section, I had taken up case studies out of the hundreds of cases that I've handled as a part of the grievance committee, which is the internal complaints committee for organizations. I've taken just 10 of those case studies and I reflected on them to see what is the process and how organizations delve into handling those complaints. It was also about understanding the psychological reasons for those complaints which come in. The third section is the collective journey that we have had towards harassment-free workspaces. So just to take you through a small case here, this was a case from from the interiors of a state of Haryana in India, which is a very conservative industrial belt. A lady working there was taken for an outstation trip by her boss. We would have had a standard operating procedure where we would have received a complaint in writing as per the Act. Within the next 7 days, we send a notice to the respondent, received his response over the next 10 days as is laid down in the Act, gone in for more inquiry through the CCTV footage, through more witnesses and evidence, and taken at least a few days to resolve. But when I went, for example, to the organization as the external counsel on the grievance committee, I see that we followed a very spiritual operating procedure where we found a very proactive HR. Even before the whole committee got together, they had already retrieved the CCTV footage from the hotel where the lady had been taken. There was complete proof which could have pinned down the respondent. But what we followed was the girl's wish. She had grown up in a small town. She had fought her way hard to study engineering. She had joined the organization, and here she was sitting in front of us, having faced sexual harassment and would have had to leave her job, and her career would have gone for a toss for a lifetime. But she wanted to go through a process of conciliation. The organization followed her wish. We as the committee did what she wanted us to do. And this, I think, was the enabling environment provided by the organization, which preserved the culture of care and harmony. And this is definitely a spiritual process. Similarly, there was one other case where a girl came up with a complaint of mental harassment. And we said, sorry, this does not lie within the Sexual Harassment Act, and therefore the organization cannot take it up through our committee. But then the woman came up with more of such complaints where she said she was complimented on a particular day by her boss when it was a rainy day and she was wearing black. And then she came up with a 137-page written complaint. Only when one delves deeper into what would have happened with the person does one get to understand. And here was a situation where the girl had already been on a 3-month maternity leave, but was driven to desperation with the aim of wanting to earn, as she also was the child giver, the carer for her baby. Had it just been a standard operating procedure, I think we would have just done an inquiry, got the evidence and witnesses, and we would have said, sorry, this is a malicious complaint. The complaint was being made only to malign the boss because she wanted to extend her leave. But the organization did go one step ahead. We understood that she wanted an arrangement where she could continue to earn, and that is where a suggestion for a creche was made. And the organization, which had a spiritual feel, went ahead and obliged immediately. So those creche facilities demonstrated the organization's empathy and concerns and preempted any negative sentiments that would have arisen because of the termination of a colleague. These are just some of the cases that I have taken. And the pandemic, of course, let's not even talk about the number of complaints which have increased. So a case from a hospital where a nurse had been complaining, everybody in a PPE kit with a mask, with the shields and it was impossible to make out what would have actually happened. But during this entire pandemic, we've had a spurt in the complaints. There've been complaints from women saying that they've been called at inappropriate times. They've been inappropriately dressed during the video calls, or there have been explicit jokes, videos, or audios and texts that have been shared, and similarly sexual innuendos and comments on group chats. There's been a lot of intimidation. There's been comments on the social media. Everybody has suddenly taken even to work WhatsApp groups, and they've been stalking of profiles and repeated friend requests, which probably would not have happened had we been continuing to work in office spaces, which has become even more. Okay, ma'am. And this is what is our shadow pandemic. So there's been an increase in the anonymous complaints and even increase in the domestic violence. My last little bit is, can one really expect to change the world alone? Definitely not. And then therefore, I see this as a collective spiritual journey of the individuals, of the grievance committee, of the leadership, of the society, and one envisions a better world. Thank you so much. Thanks for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Dr. Surabhi Dhingra. That was so meaningful and very much needed. So thank you very much. Now I request Dr. Poonam Sethi to do her presentation.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Thank you. So greetings to all the panelists and the participants here. And at the very outset, I would like to mention that Dr. Deepti Singh is my co-author in this paper. And I must also admit that it was enlightening listening to all the wonderful people who spoke earlier. And I must also admit that this paper is a humble attempt to study the role of organizations in the post-COVID era. And it's a work in progress. So I would like to share my screen. There seems to be has failed to start.
At the bottom, you see share his screen.
It has failed. Deepti, can I ask you to share? Or let me see if I can locate it.
It's here. It's here.
Okay, thank you. So technology really intimidates me sometimes. We are talking about spiritual leadership, chaperoned through COVID crisis. And the first slide that you can see on your screen actually shows that this entire pandemic is a maze of uncertainty, and there is no single way that one can adopt to move out. And we believe that leaders can lead the pack by chaperoning. So that's a concept that I have used in this, we have rather used in this particular paper. And to begin with, I'd like to use the words of Lenin, which says that there are decades where nothing happens, and then there are weeks where decades happen. And leadership model that fits this age of disruption cannot be bereft of new forms of pedagogy, which are personal, intimate, and experiential too. The situation needs to be reviewed from multiple vantage points. And we believe that humans have an inherent capacity to reinvent themselves post any crisis. And clearly, the leadership has to draw from the watchwords of human history. We rebuild, we heal, we grow, and we learn. So leaders have to act as chaperons, helping their communities to rebuild heal, grow, and learn as best as they can, manage moment by moment, day by day. And this, the screen indicates the basic essence of our model that we have suggested. As you can see, there are COVID challenges. I'm not going to go into any greater detail because all the speakers have been talking about it, and we now all know what kind of challenges COVID has thrown at us. And it talks about the business direction post-COVID. Lot has already been said about that as well. Now, what addition that we are adding to the whole concept is that of spirituality. And this spirituality also has been defined in, various dimensions have been discussed in the, this particular seminar or conference, I would say. And the addition that we are making to this particular concept is a model, that seeks an amalgamation of two concepts. So the model that we are talking about here seeks to amalgamate Daniel Kahneman's System 2 thinking as spelled out in his book. You can see on your screens, System 2 thinking. So I'll get back to System 2 thinking a little later, but I'll simultaneously talk about the model and the leadership virtues which focus on spirituality. Deepti, you can go to the second slide again, the previous slide. So the leadership virtues, these virtues have their origin in traditional understanding of perspectives which deliberate on the fundamental purpose of man's existence and his spiritual being. One part of the literature on leadership and management talks about systems, processes, and methods that organizations follow, with focus largely on the material gains. And another set of the literature that grew parallelly to this theme largely extols the virtue of the leader as the vehicle of success for organizations. Now, our model brings the two together with a twist wherein System 2 thinking is initiated into the decision-making process, which ultimately defines the systems, processes, and methods to be followed by the organizations. Now, Daniel Kahneman has developed a beautiful, simple framework for how people think. Humans use one of two systems based on speed of processing for making decisions. System 1 is our fast thinking process, which is often done unconsciously. It is our quick think process for many easy and routine tasks. It may be more emotion driven and is based on looking for quick links or assessments. System 2 is our conscious process, which is slow, logical, and deliberate. This type of thinking is not useful for simple tasks, but extremely necessary for many of the deeper, more complex problems we may face. It is our logical decision center. Kahneman tells us System 2 allocates
Dr.
attention.
Poonam, time is up. If you can conclude quickly.
So I'll just conclude. So basically, can we move to the next slide? You can see these are some of the suggestions that tell us how we can trigger System 2 thinking into the process of decision making. And clearly, as you can see on the screen, leaders can increase their impact multifold when they exhibit elements of spirituality by displaying self-transcendent emotions. The nudges, my point is that the nudges to use System 2 in decision making will come through the leaders and managers who must train their minds to think in that manner.
Thank you, Dr. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
And the last slide, Deepti, if you could put it up there.
Yeah.
So we are thankful to Anand Saxena for his inputs and to Dr. Surbhi Dhingra and of course to ISOL Foundation for giving us this opportunity to deliberate.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Over to Anthony now.
Thank you all so much for your presentations and for submitting your research at all. I can see all of your passion through the work that you've done, and thank you for contributing it and sharing it with us all. We're going to go ahead and dive into our closing ceremony, everyone. It's been a wonderful past 48 hours with you all. We've had some wonderful speakers, and sadly, it is coming to a close, but we're going to end on a strong note. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Dr. Sunita Singh Sengupta. And thank you all for listening along so far.
Thank you, Anthony. At the outset, I would like to thank everyone. And I would like to request Susan Morgan to say a few words before I sum it up. Susan Morgan. Susan Morgan is the president of Sacred Space International USA and a dear friend of mine and very close associate of Isol Foundation. We always had the support of Susan Morgan. In 2018, Isol Foundation conferred Peace and Harmony Award on Susan Morgan on behalf of Sacred Space International. She works in the area of architecture of faith. She did her presentation in 2015 and 18, both conferences. So Susan, it's my pleasure and honor to welcome you. Susan.
You're on mute, Susan. Unmute yourself, please.
Unmute yourself.
Okay. Thank you very much, Sunita, for allowing me to come and listen to all these wonderful, really creative, wonderful presentations. Spirituality in the workplace. How could you possibly imagine these two coming together? Well, I am amazed and really happy with all your presentations. It gives me lots to think about in my own situation. And I will be forever grateful for what you all have said here today.
Thank you so much, Miss Morgan, or Dr. Morgan. I don't wanna.
No, it's not Dr. Morgan.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I didn't want to disrespect you in any way. Thank you so much for your comments on the conference so far. I also want to really quickly remind you guys how our closing ceremony will go. We're going to have Dr. Singh Sengupta give final remarks, and then we're going to have our Ivana Bure Dr. Sarah Hurt to give a valedictory lecture. Then we're going to have Ivana Bure representing FIU, and then we will have some remarks by Dr. J.L. Rynam, and then we will have some final remarks and acknowledgements as well. So I will now give it over to Dr. Singh Sengupta.
At the outset, I thank Dr. Nikki Fraser and all the centers of Florida International University who came together to organize this ISOL 2020 on integrating spirituality and organizational leadership in post-COVID times. I'm extremely grateful to all the distinguished speakers who took out time and agreed to be part of this virtual international conference. I'm thankful to ISOL members as well who always stood beside me and shaped my thought process. And it's a true teamwork at ISL Foundation. When I was conceptualizing this conference, I thought of 10 tracks, and those 10 tracks will be part of the post-conference publication, the 10 different sections of the book. I'll get back to the speakers. What we could not do is have speakers on humanitarian supply chain management, and we planned a panel discussion on integrating spirituality into financial decision making. But we could not do it here. So the next follow-up conference in February 5 and 6 will be exclusively on humanitarian supply chain management and integrating spirituality into financial decision making using the art of agility. So these three different disciplines will come closer. I can see Professor Charumati is here. She is a finance professor. So I'll get back to you, Professor Charumati, and then we can think of a collaborative work and we'll move forward. It was amazing having all the speakers and all the distinguished panelists together in this journey. Now I back to Anthony. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Singh Sengupta. Again, we all would not have been able to be here if it wasn't for the work that you and Dr. Nikki Frazier put into this conference. So thank you so much. We are going to now go ahead and give our time over to Dr. Sarah Hertz. Excuse me, give me one moment. Dr. Sarah Hertz, she'll be giving our valedictory lecture, and she received her PhD in finance with a minor in economics from Rutgers University. She currently serves as a tenured associate professor of finance at Empire State College, State University of New York, with over 15 years of experience in higher education. Dr. Hertz has also held faculty positions at Fairleigh Dickinson University, Glasgow Caledonian New York College, Georgian Court University, and Rutgers Business School. Her current research focus is on corporate finance, investing, and the source and application of ethics in the teaching and business worlds. It is my honor to present Dr. Sarah Hertz.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Dr. Hertz, I came across your article, which you co-authored with Miriam Gerstein, and that's how we got you. We searched for your picture throughout the Google, but we could not get it. But we are glad we are finally seeing you. Welcome, Dr. Hertz.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited about this. Is the audio good, or should I try a headset?
No, it's good.
Okay, perfect. So I'm very excited to present my work. This is definitely a research interest of mine that I've spent a lot of time over the last probably decade by now. And I'm going to try to share my screen so that you can see the presentation. And I'm going to try to leave some time at the end for any questions or comments that anyone may have. And then I'll look at the chat on the side as well. So let me just try to share my screen. A minute. I've used Zoom before, but somehow not enough that it's going so smoothly. Can you see my screen?
No. Avalisa, did you give Dr. Hertz
Yes. She has a panelist link. Yeah.
Okay, is it good now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Visible.
Okay, perfect. So I'm going to be talking about my paper that I wrote with Dr. Hershey Freeman from Brooklyn College, which is part of the City University of New York. Our paper is on why spirituality belongs in the finance and accounting curriculum. Now, this paper was published in 2015 in the Journal of Accounting and Finance. And I'm very excited to present it at this conference as well. So by way of introduction, I'm speaking to educators and speaking to people in academia. And as educators and speaking with others in higher education, we have a responsibility to society through educating the next generation of students. Hopefully we can impart the importance of spirituality. And I hope that, through this talk, you'll get some insight into how we can use our role as educators to help society through educating students in a variety of courses. My experience is obviously in finance and accounting. I've been teaching finance at Empire State College for the last 9 years. and I've taught previously before, but it's relevant for many different disciplines. But I'm going to be speaking about it primarily from the business disciplines. So I'm going to begin with the purpose of education. What is the purpose of education? Is it for acquiring values, morals, and ethics, such as Brooks suggests? Or is it for acquiring a philosophy of life and an intellectual cognitive stimulation, or the cognitive approach? And the third option of the purpose of education would be to acquire skills for a career. Both hard skills, which is the technical knowledge, as well as soft skills, which would be things such as critical thinking, communicating, work ethic, collaboration, skills that are very important, obviously, for students to learn. Now, the purpose of education has sort of shifted over time. Initially, it was more of an intellectual pursuit, and it has become more of a vocational pursuit. Even not so long ago, but within the last decade, 50 years ago, different subjects that were more intellectual were looked upon as more important, the theoretical subjects, and more nowadays the more technical skills are more sought after. But one answer as to the purpose of education, would be that both these or all these approaches are valuable, and higher education can focus on all three if it's done on the right way, on the right skill set. And as educators, our goal should be to ensure that we're helping our students, no matter which discipline, but also society as well. We have the goal should be not just to do our job to the book and to the letter, but to make sure that our students will become valuable members of society. Now, I'm going to talk about the financial crisis of 2008 as sort of a starting point here. We all know that the financial crisis of 2008 was probably the worst crisis that the United States experienced since the Great Depression. These various financial and accounting scandals showed us that there was a breakdown in the values of corporate America, beginning with Enron and many other financial and accounting scandals thereafter, such as Tyco, WorldCom. Many jobs were lost, millions of jobs, perhaps, and some of them permanently. And trillions of dollars in market value just evaporated with this financial crisis. Now, after the financial crisis, it became apparent that the cause or a lot of the reason for this crisis was due to the breakdown of values, that America had a compromise in their sense of ethics. This happened obviously for the financial crisis in a very large scale, but it was also prevalent on a smaller scale as well. If you just think about airlines and cell phone companies, there are all these hidden fees that are incorporated into every bill. And that's also somewhat unethical if you think about it. It's on a much smaller scale than Enron or Tyco, but it's also has become very, very prevalent. And so much so that the president of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, William Dudley, said that there is evidence of deep-seated cultural and ethical failures at many large financial institutions. It became very obvious with the financial crisis of how much needs to be fixed. Now, one way that America did try to rectify some of the causes for the financial crisis was through the passage of the Sarbanes-Oxley Act in 2002. Sarbanes-Oxley is very often abbreviated as SOX. But the question is, did SOX really help the cause of the problem or the root of the problem? So I'm not going to try so much to answer that question per se, but to sort of shape this to show you that as educators, we can shift the trend of the future. When we teach our students the right way and the right values, hopefully we can prevent future financial disasters from happening in the future. Now, as professors, we're required to rethink what we are teaching students, and especially in accounting and finance courses. especially since many of these scandals that nearly destroyed the world financial system did involve finance and accounting. Now, I'd like to discuss, some aspects of this, and primarily how the objective of maximizing shareholder value may be at the core of the problem. So let's, just briefly examine what maximizing shareholder value is. This is one of the most fundamental and key principles in finance. It's taught to all accounting and business students. They usually visit it in several courses, and it's drilled into our students that this is very, very important. The goal of the firm is to maximize shareholder value. We teach them that the primary goals of managers should be to maximize the wealth of the firm's owners, and that this is the basis for all of corporate success, the extent to which a firm will increase the wealth of its shareholders, either by way of dividends or by increasing the share price. And managers should take whatever actions are necessary to increase the firm's share price. Now, supporters of capitalism will argue that the goal of capitalism, and one of the key concepts is this maximizing shareholder value. So the supporters will say that this will definitely help society in that it will sort of force firms to provide better products and innovation through competition. Wealth will be dispersed to all productive people. It will promote pluralism, decentralized power, and it will create strong economic growth and yield productivity and prosperity that will definitely greatly impact and benefit society. Now, Milton Friedman, the famous American economist, said that the social responsibility of business is to increase profits, which, sort of encapsulates this whole idea that the goal of the firm is to increase shareholder value, increase profits, and that will better society. Now, the flip side of this is that one of the things that we're promoting is greed. We're saying that greed is good. If a firm is looking to increase value and share price and everything that goes along with it, the ends are justifying the means, and greed is good. And we're encouraging greediness in management. In fact, after Enron, Alan Greenspan, who was then the chairman of the Federal Reserve, he was saying how easy it is for the CEOs to sort of manipulate the financial statements. And the way he said it publicly was, there's been too much gaming of the system. Capitalism is not working. There's been a corruption of the system of capitalism. Now, as we can see this, and as Alan Greenspan described, this system of maximizing shareholder value, when it's taken to the extent that management is doing things to increase the share price, and in fact resulted in so many crises and scandals, it was definitely not such a great idea. And as a result, so much of the shareholder value was destroyed in the pursuit of profits in the name of shareholder value maximization. This happened in the Great Recession, and even later on, the effects would still be seen. Jack Welch, who's the former CEO of GE, he also said that the corporate objective of maximizing shareholder value was, in his words, the dumbest idea in the world. He said that he felt that not only was it immoral, but in the long run, it was a good way to destroy an organization. It didn't result in long-term value for the firm. And I'm going to elaborate on this a little bit further. But he thought that a better way of, or a better view of a firm's objective would be to make high quality, constantly improving products to maximize customer satisfaction, rather than just focusing on increasing shareholder value. So let's look at some problems with the concept of capitalism and primarily of maximizing shareholder value. So the first issue that comes up with shareholder value, with maximizing shareholder value, is who are these shareholders? Who are the stakeholders? If most of the shareholders of a firm are institutional investors who expect to hold the stock for short term, for a year or two, then sell it, the strategy of the firm can be very different than if the shareholders of the firm are mainly small investors who plan on holding onto their stock for long term. And therefore, there are lots of different consequences to this. For example, executive pay, which is tied to stock options, employee pay. There's so many different ways. If employers are moving jobs offshore rather than giving their own communities and the people of their own communities jobs, it has a very big effect to all the different stakeholders in the firm. Another piece of criticism with maximizing shareholder value as the prime goal of a firm would be corporate social responsibility. The Business Roundtable Trade Group put it very well. They said that corporations have a responsibility, first of all, to make available to the public quality goods and services at fair prices, thereby earning a profit that attracts investment to continue to enhance enterprise, provide jobs, and build the economy. The long-term viability of the corporation depends on its responsibility to society of which it is a part. And the well-being of society depends on the profitable and responsible business enterprises. So it's a very circular relationship. A firm does have responsibility not only to their shareholders, but to all of society as well. The corporation has the option of taking risks, making profits, and they need to also act in a responsible manner to society. They need to take different government regulations into effect and not only look at their profit, but also social good, to society, to the environment, not just to have this minuscule view of shareholder stock price, that's their only goal. Another criticism is that when executives are looking at maximizing shareholder stock price, they often can look at it only in the short term rather than the long term. There's a lot of research in the finance literature which looks at CEO tenure or the age of CEO as a factor in CEO compensation, where CEOs who are close to retirement have a greater interest in increasing stock price and inflating the stock price even for the short term, since they have either some of their pay or stock options that are linked to the stock price. So if they increase the stock price in the short run and then they retire while the stock price is so high, it will benefit them. And the fact that they may have taken large risks for this, which can harm the firm in the long run, is irrelevant to them. And they're not interested in that because they're retired and they've gotten their pay. Now, another issue an ethical issue that can be raised with maximizing shareholder value relates to companies producing defective products. If, let's say, we know of a company that produces a product that is found to be defective for a very small number, let's say would cause, very few deaths in users, it may be cheaper for the firm to produce the product as is rather than repair the product, especially if it's been purchased by so many people till now. For example, there was a case with General Motors that it was known that they had a defective ignition piece, and they didn't recall those cars with a defective ignition switch, even though it was linked to some deaths, because it was so expensive to them. So this is something to bear in mind when we think about this objective of maximizing shareholder value. What would an executive do in such a case where it was known to be somewhat defective, can cause harm, or even, God forbid, death in some of their users? What would they do as far as the cost? And lastly, when we look at this concept of maximizing shareholder value, very often it's the top, and most of the time it's the top management that has all or for sure most of the power. Executive pay, as we've seen over the last decades, has definitely gone up while employee pay has stagnated. The result of this is that the upper management, the CEO, the CFO, the top management has the power, the minority has the power, and the working class and their labor is somewhat exploited. And this results in a lot of inequality, corruption, and economic instability. So therefore, what we should be teaching in finance courses, business courses, is the implication, not just the concept of maximizing shareholder value, but the implications of this theory and how easy it is to misapply it and use it towards the wrong ends. It can even be used as a stepping stone to a discussion of ethics and spirituality. Today's students are passionate about changing the world, which is a spiritual value. And in fact, studies show that approximately 80% of first-year college students are very interested in spirituality. So therefore, it's very reasonable to incorporate spiritual values into business courses. Spirituality is not religion, which, when we have a separation of church and state, we can't teach religion in a classroom setting, but it's very different. And I'm going to show you some ways in which we can hopefully incorporate it into the classroom, into business courses. For example, a course like business ethics is not just supposed to be a course. It's meant to teach our business students a practice, a way of acting in their professional lives that will hopefully benefit society. Students in particular are very impressionable, much more so than seasoned executives. And therefore, the classroom is the opportune time and place to teach about ethics and spirituality. It's especially important to introduce this concept into accounting and finance courses, since students taking these courses are the least likely to learn anything about spirituality from other courses. It's just not stressed enough. Now, spiritual values, and as I mentioned, I'm going to go into much more detail in a little bit later, but spiritual values include making work meaningful, respect for the creativity of employees, and making the world a better place for everyone. But just to give a brief definition on spirituality from Pava, an experience of blending integrity with integration through acceptance of the past, commitment to the future, reasonable choice, mindful action, and continuous internal and external dialogue. So let's get to some examples of what spirituality means and how we can incorporate it a little. Fogel, who was a Nobel laureate in economics, stated the importance of spirituality in the new economy. He said, according to his view, capitalism should take spiritual values into account in order to survive in the new economy. So we'll look at some aspects of spirituality. The first, a key part of being spiritual is to wanting to improve the world and make work meaningful. If life has a higher purpose, then one can expect the corporate world to strive to improve the world. Of course, the firm has responsibility to make a profit, but also that shouldn't mean that they would ignore the needs of society. A spiritual workplace would respect the abilities of employees, and therefore creativity would be important as well. In addition, and related to this, is the concept of servant leadership, that executives should see themselves as servant leaders. Servant leaders are those who empower others and are facilitators. They're not interested in their own personal aggrandizement. It's the exact opposite of an authoritarian leader who's just concerned with power and wealth. Rather, the leader who cares about others, is concerned about others. Just some examples of characteristics of servant leaders are those who have empathy for others, listen to others, trying not to hurt others, being dedicated to the growth of every single employee. This is one way that executives can help incorporate spirituality and make society better. Another way is through employee engagement. Engaged employees are not just motivated, they want their organizations to succeed. And there's a lot of evidence that shows that if employee engagement is low, then it's just not to the benefit of the whole firm. When there's a strong correlation between employee engagement, customer satisfaction, productivity, profits, those firms that have engaged employees are more likely to attract employees, retain them, and that will obviously have a positive effect on the net income and growth of the firm. Another thing that's very important is that employees want to feel like they're making a difference. The world can be improved by concern for social justice and alleviating world problems such as poverty, racism, oppression, pollution. There are lots of ways that a firm can improve the world. You know, in one way, from the employment perspective, a firm can provide employment for elderly, disabled, diversity in the workplace through hiring of minorities, concern for the environment by using renewable energy, reducing waste, emissions that will help make the world a better place. Also, a firm can help improve education by providing opportunities for lower class students, providing funds in inner city schools. Internships to high school and college students will also help. And also by purchasing from local firms, when a big firm is providing, you know, sort of increasing the sense of community by buying from local firms, it can also help society. Corporate philanthropy can be used from a strategic viewpoint as well to both enhance the image of the company and at the same time improving the world. So what is the responsibility of those in capital, who have capital? We need to teach students to incorporate these spiritual values in their career. Obviously, it's not just, as we've mentioned, you know, as I mentioned previously, not just to focus on capitalism, but to make sure to incorporate ethics, not just the talk, but actually behave in an ethical manner as well. It's very important to use the capital responsibly, to do good, such as decreasing poverty, the commitment by businesses to behave ethically and to contribute to the economic development while demonstrating respect for people and communities and society at large will definitely help as well, to be not just concerned with the shareholders of the firm, but every stakeholder, and society is a stakeholder as well. This brings to mind the concept of the triple bottom line, that not only are profits important, but people such as the employees, you know, the diversity, as I mentioned, people, profits, and the planet, the environment, to act in an environmentally responsible manner. And when a firm looks at the long-term impact of all these three components, is to the benefit of the firm. And another point that I think is important to teach students is about ethical leadership. Ethics starts from the top. Those who are in, yes, I'm finishing up, this is my last. Those at the top have a greater responsibility to society, and it trickles down to the rest of the firm. Businesses and society are interdependent. It's an advantage of the firm to act in this way because it can impact the bottom line. It's not just a cost, but it will also be an opportunity for firms as well. I'm going to just skip through this. The sustainable development is also a way for a firm. And these are just some examples of firms that are very concerned with spirituality and has impacted their bottom line. Southwest Airlines, Whole Foods, and Tom's of Maine. So in conclusion, it has, you know, the time has come for academics to not be nervous about teaching spirituality, but to incorporate it in those business courses, especially through the concept of maximizing shareholder value. And by teaching it properly, it will help and show that firms who are doing it properly will be better off than those without. The future of our generation resides in the hands of our students, and it's up to us to teach them properly so that they can become productive members of society. Any questions, comments? I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hurd. Wonderful presentation. And I must say, as an impressionable student myself, I am thankful for professors like you that do take humanity into consideration while teaching their students, and especially in a field like accounting and finance. So thank you so much. We're going to move on to our next presenter, who will be Ivana Bure. Ivana Bure is currently a student in the combined master's program, where she will be receiving both her bachelor's and master's degree at the time of her graduation, along with an undergraduate certificate in leadership and a graduate certificate in finance, Dr. Hertz, procurement, and project management. Again, it's my pleasure to introduce Ivana Bireg.
Hi, everyone. Good morning and good evening to all. My name is Ivana Buraye, as Anthony, our moderator, stated today, and I'm representing the Pi Alpha Alpha Global Honor Society for Public Affairs Administration's chapter at Florida International University. As the president of Pi Alpha Alpha's Global Honor Society's chapter, I am honored to be speaking at the Isol conference, and I would like to thank Dr. Sengupta and the Isol Foundation for having me here today. I actually came to Pi Alpha Alpha's Global Honor Society, just like any other student, to gain a professional network and to gain a professional position, but I gained so much more. Pi Alpha Alpha's Global Honor Society's objective is to foster integrity, professionalism, effective performance, promote the advancement of quality in education, and practice the arts and science of public affairs and administration. I was given the opportunity to conduct research with the Isol research team, where I learned about different examples of the marketplace and how we can improve them through Vasudeva Kutumbakam methods. At first, I was having a hard time understanding the concept of Vasudeva Kutumbakam when I first began our research, but luckily, through the supervision of Dr. Fraser and Dr. Sengupta, we were able to meet the PhD students from India. This was a great opportunity where the students, including myself, were able to learn from one another. I specifically learned from my new colleague and friend, Omar G, who actually presented today. I was a bit hesitant to ask the professors to further explain the concept of Vasudeva Kutumbakam, but I asked Omar G if he would be able to further explain. So he broke it down into two parts. The first part, Vasudeva, which means the worlds, and Kutumbakam, which means small home. In essence, the phrase means the world is one family or a small home. He explained how it's extremely important to keep in mind the Vasudeva Kutumbakam phrase because it's extremely important during these pandemic times with COVID. What was great about this experience was that it opened my eyes and showed me a different aspect that I did not think of before, by simply hearing his perspective and his culture. Every person is experiencing something different all around the world, and the best way to find solutions for a majority of these problems involving marketplaces is to think of others as we think of ourselves, as everything is a domino effect. For instance, as our research showed and explained by Anthony and Brittany yesterday, there were factories in Bangladesh that were forced to close due to large global corporations canceling their agreements. For these large global companies, it's a simple cancellation of an agreement. For these small other companies, such as the factory owners and the workers, this was much more. With these cancellation of agreements, the factories were forced to close and many workers were laid off. Like I mentioned before, a domino effect, which hurt factory owners and the workers' economy and their community. If these large corporations were to place themselves in a different perspective, if not monetary value, but rather think of others like they think for themselves and keep the Vasudeva Kutumbakam phrase in mind of the world as one family, it can help us prevent this domino effect that is occurring within many communities, such as in Bangladesh. Because of Pi Alpha Alpha's Global Honor Society, I was able to learn of a foundation that keeps this Vasudeva Kutumbakam phrase in mind. This is the Isol Global Foundation, which is spearheaded by Dr. Sengupta. The Isol Global Foundation Society's objective is to promote peace and harmony for global economic development and it's an interface research-based management education initiative, which draws insight from various wisdoms, traditions across different faith groups and integrates them with modern management practices to promote love, compassion, and truth at work in order to create cohesion and harmony amongst people and our planet. As a future public administrator, this has been a great learning experience, and I will ensure to continue and keep in mind the Vasudeva Kutumbakam phrase while implementing problem-solving procedures that will safeguard the 4 E's of governance, which is equity, economy, efficiency, and effectiveness. Once again, thank you, Dr. Sengupta, Dr. Reina, and the Isol Foundation for having me here today.
Thank you so much, Ivana. I feel like you represented both Pi Alpha Alpha as well as the ISOL Foundation very well, and you are making a wonderful president. So we're thankful for the work that you're doing for Pi Alpha Alpha. It's also been a pleasure researching with you. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Ivana. We're going to go ahead and move on to our next speaker. Our next speaker, if you did not get a bit of his bio last night, will be Dr. J.L. Rynam. So just a little reminder of all the amazing work this man has done. He has a rich experience of over 40 years in the petroleum industry at top management level. He has been a recipient of several awards from industry and other associations, and currently he is chairman of the ISOL Foundation. I present to you all Dr. J.L. Rynam.
Thank you, Anthony. It has been a wonderful 2-day session. And I must confess that for me, understanding is that every event should have a take-home point. And I have taken personally, although I consider myself a selfless man, yet I am selfishly selfish to the extent that you have to gain many things from the presentations that have taken place. And 2 days virtual conference in association with great university, FIU, and Sunita Singh, ISOL, that's our ISOL. I feel that probably some exposure to Indian context has got to be there to general public. One is that spirituality is a defined situation in almost 4 facets of life, which Indian civilization has defined. That means the childhood, or adulthood, and vanprastha, that means living, and ultimately the sannyas. So if we go into concept of spirituality, by definition, probably it is different for different person. But picture-wise, you can see a mother's love for child, how she sort of tries to impart spirituality through her actions to the child. Because no mother would like to go into a system where a child is not spiritual or a thought-provoking person. She develops herself into that spiritual mode. And later on, the man picks up all spirituality through his actions throughout the lifespan. So today's or yesterday's presentations have given me this hope that yes, post-COVID situation, things have come to stay, things are improving or at least stabilizing now, but there is a need for people to learn things those have come to stay and apply those in our dealings with our people. This type of understanding, if it is developed, I'm sure that such presentations can go a long way in building up rapport amongst people, because world is almost a global village and we are communicating right across the globe right now. This only shows that yes, things can be corrected by impressing, if not enforcing, impressing thought views, thoughts to across the people in terms of our sort of understanding of life. Because life is a very, very dear thing to almost everybody. Nobody wants to die, but then the situation is that people have to go. So therefore, learning is a process continuously. I must compliment Dr. Nikki Fraser Sunita Singh, and almost all the persons, including Mr. Anthony Watson, who has been a very nice moderator all throughout. My heartfelt thanks to both the institutions for organizing this type of conference. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Raina, and I definitely agree with what you were saying in regards to learning. I personally think that that is an important aspect to spirituality, as I have learned a lot within the past 6 months about spirituality, preparing and becoming a part of this journey. We're going to lastly move on before we have some closing statements from Dr. Nikki Fraser and Dr. Sunita Singh Sengupta. We're lastly going to move on to our last speaker, Mr. Krishna, excuse me if I pronounce your name incorrectly, Mr. Krishna Kumar, who is a Vedic scholar and a core group member of the Isol Foundation. I have the honor of announcing Mr. Krishna Kumar. You're on mute.
Yeah. I am mute. Thank you very much for the time. And indeed, it was a wonderful day with every one of you, each one of you. Two things I would like to add here. Am I audible to you? Two things I would like to add here is that communication is something which we had in the Indian context. A totally a different perspective prior to the time when these gadgets were developed. Time before Morse or Graham Bell and the modern communication and interfaces. We used to have a sensory perception, a clear imagery of what is to happen, and even in houses where number of guests used to come. I belong to a family of, my grandfather was a healer in snake venom. And he used to tell exactly who is the patient coming, what kind of snake bite it is, what kind of medical preparation has to be there, how many people are coming, food for all these people. These were all prepared in advance. So we come to a state that our sensory perceptions are going down below the normal human perception, what would have been 2 centuries before. So we need to look into this aspect deeply. Second is about what I would like to say that second point which I would like to say is about the total agility. Agility is a sum total of the faculties developed in a yogic system. Today we have reduced yoga to somewhere of the what do you call as the asana posture system. But yogic system has to be reinvented and redefined, and it becomes one of the basic faculties of managerial infrastructure, human infrastructure. Human infrastructure means faculty development. So how we can incorporate it into these things have to be taught on a larger scale. India has no religion. Neither yoga, yoga or Vedas, these are not religious. We are not, we have to have a clear demarcation between these two things, that what is called epic characterizations or epic systems and the Vedic systems. So it is an earnest request that we have to have unity in defining, in understanding spirituality as a sum total of the knowledge basis which everyone has inculcates. Knowledge is completeness. Knowledge has no truncations. Everything when it is imbibed into an individual, that is knowledge. That is scientific, methodological. It's a very what you call the cumulative effect. Knowledge is cumulative. It is everyday changing, transitory. Knowledge is not static. It adds to itself. It eliminates something. So management also is something called there is a elimination process in it and an addition process in it. So where we have to look forward in the post-COVID scenario is somewhere to this point. It's my suggestion to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Krishna Kumar. That was our final speaker, you all. I will now give the floor over to Dr. Singh Sengupta and we'll start with Dr. Nikki Frazier, and then we'll close it with Dr. Singh Sengupta. But I just wanted to thank each and every one of you for allowing me to be your host for these past 2 days. This has been my very first time hosting, and I am grateful to have done it with such an amazing group of people. I have learned so much. I have been happy to see the work that's being done all around the globe in society. It has inspired me, it has uplifted me and encouraged me. And I hope that I can continue and learn more from you all. I'm sure I will see many of you around, and I know I'll see more amazing work from you all. But I started this conference yesterday and I asked one question from everyone. It was to keep an open mind. That was what I requested from everyone, to keep an open mind. So as we move into exiting this conference, I hope that you all still continue to keep an open mind as we continue this work in the world. I'm so thankful and so honored. I'm Anthony Wooten, and I hope you all have a wonderful evening or morning. All right, on to Dr. Nikki Frazier.
Thank you so much, Anthony. You make a wonderful game show host, because this is part of the game of life. Yes, applause. Thank you so much. I also want to give such tremendous gratitude to Dr. Singh Sengupta, Dr. Raina, and all of our presenters for making my students, public policy and administration, COIL, cyber, the FIU Frost Museum. Who am I leaving out? The Perez Public Policy Institute, right, for allowing us to become members of your family. And so I think that's it. All of you have spoken so much more than I could ever. My students have represented our department, our school, and myself as their humble teacher beautifully. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nikki Frazier. And as the concluding words, I first of all extend my gratitude to you, Nikki, for coming forward when I requested, would you like to collaborate? And you were very forthcoming. I'm extremely grateful. I thank Anthony Wooten for being an amazing host. Amazing, amazing. He was really a great work. I thank Rohit Shah, who worked very hard and woke up at 3:30 in the morning to open the Zoom and everything. I thank Amarjeet. I thank Avilasha Sen Gupta. I thank Dr. J.L. Raina for his guidance. I thank Mr. Krishna Kumar, Dr. J.L. Raina, other members of Isol Foundation to be besides me in this and be with me in this journey. We are extremely grateful to Florida International University, so many centers joining this through Dr. Fraser. We are extremely grateful. I'm thankful to Ivana Bure for her beautiful presentation, and Isol Foundation would like to create a student council at Florida International University. And Ivana Bure have to take the lead and responsibility. She beautifully did that. So we are going back with a very positive hope that Ivana will create a student council with me and Dr. Fraser we have been discussing. So my heartfelt gratitude to each and all of you who came forward, attended, participated, and spoke. It was you all who made this conference. So thank you all very much.